Welcome to the Sentient Sky, a podcast on astrology, the cycles, and sacred intelligence.
Presented to you through a Southern Hemisphere lens by Yvonne Wildheart and Rebecca Holly. Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of the Sentient Sky podcast. I am Rebecca.
And I am Yvonne. And we are meeting here for our fourth episode of the Sentient Sky. We look into the key transits, patterns, and energies that are emerging through the month of July 2024. Today is Monday, the 8th of July, and we are recording this at 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time.
And some of the big things that are happening throughout July that have already happened and will happen are the Neptune stationing retrograde in Pisces. We start to get a first look at Pluto in Aquarius's oppositions from Leo, with some of the faster moving planets moving through Leo. We also have the Mars and Uranus conjunction, which will be integrating the fixed star Algol. We also have the charts for the new moon in Cancer and our second full moon in Capricorn. And right at the end of the month, we have a Chiron retrograde as well. So there's lots of big things happening in July.
So before we begin, there's an invitation here to set an intention, an invocation. So if you're feeling cold, just maybe taking a deep breath and closing your eyes and bringing your shoulders open and out and opening up your heart space. As I light our candle that will hold us through our reading today, and I call in the goddess Nuit, actually, who's wanting to come through right now to hold us as we spiral from the center of our being, the void space within our very cells and our earthly body. We open up to your ever-expanding portal of galactic wisdom, knowledge, and consciousness. We call for full illumination of our unique universal map, our imprint of time and space. We call the stars, the planets, and all the spaces in between to speak through us and to us with crystalline clarity. May this transmission of galactic proportions shift us through the veils, expanding us beyond the realms of infinite creation. May we feel safe and held as we transmit this cosmic coding through our earthly vessels in service for the greater good of all beings, as we deeply remember that we are galactic citizens, ever-evolving conduits of the cosmic matrix, fulfilling our soul's mission and our beloved Earth at this time. And so it is, and bless it be.
And so it is.
Welcome.
Yes, welcome. And so today, as we are a Southern Hemisphere operation of witches here, all of our transits are based on AEST, Australian Eastern Standard Time. And while you're listening, if you are wanting to connect with how the transits may be lighting up your own chart, then you may want to have your chart in front of you, but keep particular attention to your sun sign, your moon sign, and your rising sign, as these will be areas of the chart which are particularly sensitive. So if some of the areas that we're talking about are where your sun, moon, or ascendant is, then they'll be particularly meaningful for you.
And please note that some of the things that we say may or may not resonate. So don't be discouraged by the language we use. Just sit with it, allow it to flow through you and speak to you in the way that you know. And if you're not sure, or if you're wanting to connect to us, come to the Sentient Sky Patreon, where you can find us, bring your questions there, your comments. And if you want to have this directly to your inbox, please sign up. The first tier membership is free. And then if there's extra levels, if you want to get a little bit more of what we have to offer.
And so let's chat a little bit about what was happening in June before we look at what's to come. So, Yvonne, was there anything notable that you wanted to share from your journey through June?
Oh, June. Oh my goodness. June was a month. It was a month. It started off. What I really loved actually about June was the lunations. I loved that both the Gemini new moon and the first Capricorn new full moon, because we have a second one coming up in July, was both with Venus, and I really felt the beauty of that. And, it was, yeah, just how that Venus really reverberated through the prayers that we were making. And it was just really delightful, the lunations. But what caught me as a bit of a snag was Mars traveling through Taurus. And I have a Mars in Sag, so moves really quickly. I have a lot of fire in my chart. So a Mars in Sag, I felt like I had wet concrete on my feet. It was such a slowdown after the Aries Mars and all the things that were happening in Aries. Then it was just like, whoomp, and I felt, everything started slowing down and I was getting frustrated and things weren't happening as fast as I want or not happening at all. And then myself and my family all got sick. And so it was like, I wasn't listening, and this sickness came into our household to say, well, you're not listening, so let's just make you just not do anything at all. So it's been tricky. Mars in Taurus is really tricky for someone like me. It has lots of fire, 4 planets in Sag. Like it's just, we're so used to moving at a really fast pace and moving this way and that way and with such ease, but this was hard. So yeah, that was my June. How about you, Beck?
Yeah, I hear that. My little family all ended up sick too, and that's why our July forecast is coming out mid-July, is just because this is the timing that's opened up for us to be able to be here. And it was, yeah, the first week of Mars in Taurus that my daughter got sick. She ended up with a virus, and she was sick for the better part of a week on and off. And then my partner got sick in amongst that. And then I got sick. But when I got sick, it hit me really hard. And I actually haven't been sick like that in 2 years. Like I was in bed for 3 days. And so for me, Taurus is where my moon is. And so Mars was coming towards my natal moon, and the moon very much represents the physical body and is a really big indicator for health things. But I was also having a Mars opposition because my Mars is in Scorpio natally. So there were a couple of different ways that Mars was really activating heat and inflammation and the immune system. And then for my daughter, Taurus is her rising sign. So for her, she had Mars coming through her first house of self and again, and the body as well. But she also has a Scorpio sun. So Mars was opposing her sun. So like us all getting sick at once. I'm going to watch this like first, second, like the Mars and Taurus thing I will watch next year, and I will not plan anything because there's a solid chance that it just pings so many of mine and my family's things at the same time. And my partner too also has a Scorpio sun. So he was also having Mars opposite his natal sun. So there's lots of heat and inflammation. And it was like 2 weeks basically where we just had to tap out of the life that was going on outside and just be home and housebound and tending ourselves. But something else that Mars brought, which I found really interesting, was a really big haircut. I chopped off all of my, well, not all of my hair. It's a lot of hair. I chopped off like about this much hair. And I started feeling the call to that as Mars entered Venus ruled Taurus. And I didn't realize on the day that I cut it. I just woke up one morning. I was like, today's the day. And I put it in pigtails and I went, but it's like sheared it all off. And when I looked back at the chart, I was having a lunar return within a degree. So the moon was on my natal moon with Mars 3 degrees away. So here's Mars bringing the literal severing and the cutting of a part of myself in that way, but in a Venus way of really letting go, of being so willing to have something just fall away that wasn't working. And I think I've probably cut off quite a lot of like my COVID hair and my pre-baby hair. And, so it kind of feels like I've had a bit of a defrag and I'm a little bit more up to date with that. But I'm still also a little bit brain foggy and just not quite right after being sick too. So I wish I had other things to report on, but all I remember is Mars.
And I'm just thinking of that Taurus energy of that body, earth body, and that Uranus in Taurus at the moment, which we're going to talk about a bit later, actually. It's interesting how it's coming up now, but that change is like, right, I'm doing it now. That sudden changes of the
Mhm.
actual Earth body. I love it. And also just thinking too of how we both, our families both got sick. And I know of a lot of other stories, who other people were sick as well around this time. And I can't help thinking that Neptune, in Pisces, that station retrograde, back on, and we'll talk about this next, on the 2nd of July. There's something about that where, it's linked to viruses and airborne stuff, that's this sort of water through air and Pisces, that viruses move through whole households and throughout our communities and things like that. So that's a really interesting sort of analogy as well.
And even just thinking of Saturn in Pisces, like Saturn sort of contracts and represses and cools the function of things down. And when something is cold, it doesn't move with so much ease. And so when if you literally think of having cold hands and trying to do something with like stiff, cold fingers, that's really tricky. And so Saturn in Pisces can really cool down some of the body's more complex systems, and it can slow things down and make things sluggish. And Pisces rules things like our lymphatic system and the waters and the fluids of the bigger system of the body. So to have this potential setup of Saturn just like, depressing that function a little bit, and then Mars being in detriment in Taurus, like Mars not really enjoying that territory and also not having the speed that he wants to. Like it's a bit of a setup for the two malefics to both be in a position where that door to infection really opened up. And I too just had a lot of people around me, all within that 2 or 3 week period, everybody seemed to be sick.
Yeah, it was really, really fascinating just to watch everybody go down. And also that coldness that you talk about, Saturn, and just how here in the Southern Hemisphere, we're just coming out of that winter solstice. Like we're still very much in that winter solstice period where it is cold and it's hard to warm your bones. Like, I took the kids off to the hot springs just to sit in this water that was, above, body temperature, and just feel the bone deep warmth that we sort of really crave this time of year. So that was, yeah, that was a beautiful sort of Cancer sort of season activity of just going and immersing ourselves in like these womb water type spas, which was just such good medicine, actually.
Mm, that sounds so good.
It's
I'm
good.
like I'm feeling some of what you guys experience just listening to you talk about that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so yeah, it was big for June, even though a lot of it still feels a bit foggy for me. But I think looking at an overview of July, we did that at the beginning, but let's just quickly go through a bit of a list again of what we're going to be looking at. So on the 2nd of July, Neptune stationed retrograde, and that was within only a couple of days of Saturn stationing retrograde, both of which are in Pisces. So there's quite a big dance happening there. And we're also going to spend a little bit of time today talking about the nodal bendings and the nodal axis themselves, and the eclipse stories that are playing out, and how it's not just when the sun and moon are meeting at the nodes that that story is playing out. So we're going to sort of flesh that out a little bit today as well. We've got the Cancer new moon on the 6th of July, the Mars Uranus Algol conjunction, the second Capricorn full moon. We have Mercury entering its retrograde shadow, Mars ingressing into Gemini, Venus Venus and the Sun ingress into Leo, making oppositions to Pluto. Mercury moves into Virgo, and we have Chiron stationing retrograde as well. So there's um, lots of movements happening, but particularly with the outer planets and the nodes this month.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get this first glimpse of what does it look like on the Aquarius Pluto axis to Leo, with now Mercury has now gone into Leo, and Venus and the Sun will move. So this is the first glimpse for the next 20 years of what this, Aquarius Pluto axis to Leo looks like, this opposition of this push-pull energy of that will play out, yeah, as I said, for the next 20 years. which is, yeah, very interesting. New energy, fresh blood.
Yeah, and it's
Yes.
it's important too, like it'll give us a sense of how this may continue to unfold from here. Did you want to go through some of our
Yeah.
keywords and themes?
Yeah, absolutely. So the key words that we've come up for July is instability, encouragement to turn tragedy into something beneficial, weird times and space bendings, disorientation. The bigger picture coming through to be integrated into the day to day, even when we don't have full clarity on what we are doing or creating. So there's this level of trust that's been sung up for us, that we can choose to follow it or not, but that this is requiring trust throughout the month of July.
Very much so. And so let's just talk a little bit about the nodes and the nodal axis, so the south node and the north node, because a lot of what is happening this month involves aspects being made to those nodes. And we'll be repeating ourselves again and again with the different transit charts that we look at. Oh, look, this one's squaring a node, it's in the bendings. Or, oh, look, this one's now trining the nodes or whatever. And so the North Node and the South Node, they're not planets or asteroids. They're not physical bodies up in the sky. They're theoretical points which tell us where the eclipses are going to be happening. And aside from that more astronomical standpoint, one way of imagining them is that it's a great big wormhole, and one end sucks things in and the other one spits things out. And so the one that the North Node, which wants to create and generate and manifest, excuse me, and which is very connected to our incarnation and this life and what we're here to do, but also what we hunger. It's literally the dragon's head. Like, what is that dragon, salivating for and literally wanting to call into this life? Excuse me, I'm going to be doing a little bit of that through this episode today. And the South Node, the dragon's tail, is what we've processed, moved through, and what is done. It is a dissolving, a spiritualizing. It's not the physical parts of the North Node, but the more ethereal, intangible parts of the South Node. And it's literally the dragon's tail. And we can also see that as the dragon's butt pooping things out that it doesn't need. So the things that it has processed and drawn something through during day-to-day life, like that's then the part that breaks down, and it's the excrement that's no longer needed. But the South Node is also more past focused and more backwards looking, whereas the North Node is more forward focused and future looking. So it's the calling in and the letting go. But if I can really see it in my mind,
Me too.
you kind of see it like two cones where their points are connecting in the middle, that are like facing outwards, and they both have these vortexes on either side. And so what the nodes bring is chaos, instability, unexpected beginnings and endings, but they are particularly otherworldly and strange. And I actually think the best word for them is weird, but like a WYRD. They're weird, and even talking about them can throw you into a bit of a node portal where you sort of know what you're talking about, you sort of don't, but the whole point of them is that they exist outside of the material mundane realm. It's not a planet like Mercury or an asteroid. Like it's a point. It's a little bit different.
Yeah. And when we have, so what we're going to talk about next will be where the sun is, and the sun has just come out, what we call a nodal bending, is where the planets or points are squared, so 90-degree angles to each of the nodes. So it sort of is a reflection of the eclipses that had just happened back in sort of late March and early April to the ones that are coming up in September and October. But it's like what Becky and I were talking about this before we started. It's like the time spinner on Harry Potter. And it's just like,
Mm.
where are you going? You're going back to the past to fix what needs to happen for the future. It really brings this really illusory sort of time is weird, time bending energy to whatever's happening at that time. So it's quite a strange and weird, and you might feel out of sorts, and it's like which way is up, which way is down. We don't quite know because it's like the time spinner is spinning us sort of in a bit of a washing machine of where we're going to be spat out. It's really, really interesting. And there's so many aspects of sextiles and trines from planets to these points. Nodal points throughout July. And yeah, this is why we're speaking to the nodes, because I think this is a part of that warping that has already been happening, but it will continue. And I feel it's just going to get stronger as we go through July. It's such a weird and strange time, and especially also we've been saying with Saturn, the Lord of Time in Pisces, where time is, Pisces is unbounded energy. It's like, whoa, what even is Saturn in Pisces? It's like this Lord of Time trying to bind it all together, but how can it in Pisces when it's just like sort of busted open, and it feels like it's creating like timelines or this, time's not linear element, which we know time's not linear, but this really is this embodiment of time is not linear aspect. Yeah, it's quite strange.
It is. So like when you're working astrologically, you don't just look at one planet to give you all of the answers for a theme. And so that's why this is coming through so strongly is because we have the nodes which kind of warp and distort things. And there's lots of conversations happening with the nodes at the moment. But then when we also look to Saturn, the Lord of Time, also being in this in like the ocean, this free flowing state, it kind of makes me feel like I have even deeper permission to be doing this on the 8th of July instead of late June, because like what even is time, right? And it's that thing of like, when do we do the thing? And it's like, we'll do the thing at the right time. And like that's such a
So it's it that Gandalf, the wizard's always you would know
like
that.
perfectly on. I don't know the perfect quote, but yeah, I'm sure that it's something like a wizard is always on time,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the I guess the invitation there is like, can we relax into our modern notion of time and what our needs are and what we should do and have to do and must do, and like what also are we being asked to be more flexible with. But I did just want to very briefly mention with the nodes again, as a point of reference for our listeners, is perhaps it's worth thinking about where your own north node and south node are, just for a little bit of context. So where your north node is in your chart, whatever sign that is in, if there are planets nearby that node, it'll be an area of your chart that you call in, and that you're hungry for, and that it's a part of your life that you want to manifest and participate in, and your purpose can be really woven into that. But it's also something that can never be fully satisfied. The North Node has a limitless sense of hunger. And so there's an interesting dance with the nodes where we never fully achieve because it's an ongoing work. And so coming into a flow and a dance with the nodes is really important. We don't just do the work of the node and like tick it off the list. You can do some things like that with some of the planets, but not the nodes. And then, so yeah, whatever area of the chart that is in, it's something you're hungry for. And it's something that life calls you into too. And then the South Node can be something that feels familiar somehow, or that feels like something you've done before, but it can also kind of put a bit of a fog or a mist over that area of the chart as well. Like the South Node can be a little bit cancelling and obscuring. So if your South Node is in a prominent area of your chart or is near important planets, it may make those other planets difficult to connect with, because it's kind of within that churning edge or that churning portal of the South Node. And the South Node is trying to break things down and dematerialize things. And that can be different for our human minds to then understand, well, what is this thing, when what we're trying to do is speak to it as a material object, when actually we're being asked to connect with it in a different way. So that might be a good thing to just relate to those nodes in your own chart a little bit. And then the transiting nodes at the moment, we have the North Node in Aries and the South Node in Libra. So at the moment, the North Node is amplifying and bringing hunger to everybody's Aries. And the South Node is bringing reflection, review, and release, and breaking down and obscuring to the Libra parts of our chart. So if you've got significant things in Aries or Libra, then they're getting churned in that vortex at the moment. And what we're going to be talking about is the Capricorn Cancer axis, which is on that square. So that's all of the cardinal signs, because that's where the nodal bendings are, that 2 or 3 degree window where that square happens.
Yeah, amazing. And we're in the middle of it. We're in Cancer season. You know, we've had Mercury, the Sun, Venus, you know, all flowing through this square aspect, and that's why it's going to come up a lot today. And then as the planets move into Leo, there becomes like another axis that, you know, will trigger those points as well. So yes, it's time for weird time bending and all sorts of things, but good work that can be done during these times to, you know, to go back to the past, to do, I'm just thinking of Daniel Fall's ancestral work of going back to the past through journeys and things like that, to connect with the most recent well and healed ancestor, and to speak to them, to bring healings through the ancestral line, but then call in like the grandchildren and the great grandchildren, and channel that energy to the future as well, to bring this healing of light. And if we keep in mind that time isn't linear, and that, you know, we can do this work at the moment, it's very easily accessed because of the points and what's happening in the skies, that this deep ancestral healing from the past, and moving the healing and the light through us in this earthly realm in our chart, and to filter it to the future for the benefit of the next generations to come. It's really potent this time. It's strong. We can use this, and this is the perfect time to do this work. It's not always going to be this way, but at the moment it is. So it's yeah, and also thinking as the nodes are moving through these cardinal signs, and especially in that Aries point, because we're about to have, you know, in the next couple of years to see Neptune and Saturn both move into Aries. So it feels like the North Node is doing some big work here in preparation to welcome that Neptune and Saturn into the Aries parts of your chart.
Yeah, very much so. And I love that reminder of like that this is a potent time to be sitting with the nodes, even though it's not eclipse season as such. And one of the reasons for that is because once you're in eclipse season, it's kind of too late.
Yeah.
It's happening, right? It's happening. We're in the thick of it, and you've just got to roll with whatever weirdness shows up. But particularly when important planets like the luminaries, the sun and the moon are the two bodies which allow those nodal points to exist in the first place. So particularly when the sun moves through those bendings, it's really important. The luminaries are particularly affected by the nodes because they're a part of that eclipse story. And so when we're in between the access of eclipses happening, it is a really good time to reflect on, well, where am I pivoting now in my eclipse story from whatever was happening 3 months ago, and where are little threads of that story coming through where I'm being encouraged to go this way or that way, or to look at something I hadn't thought of before. Like, this is a really great time to integrate more fully whatever happened with the last set of eclipses in preparation for the next one, because once they're here, they're here. And it's a little bit more difficult to choose how you want to show up to that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking of the square, aspect, squares are 90 degrees. It calls for action and movement. So, just reflecting on what you just said, Becky, now, like, now's the time for action, to reflect and to integrate and to do something different. What was brought up in the eclipses back in late March and early April in preparation for what's to come. So this is the action point of the wheel, action point of this cycle. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, very much so. I thought I'd just throw the chart up so that we also have like a visual sense of what we're talking about, because our first transit that we're going to look at is the Neptune station, which happened on the 2nd of July. But this chart also incorporates this perfect moment of the sun being in that nodal bending. So you can really see it here, and with these square aspects happening between the nodes, that this is the bending here. So it's a 2 or 3 degree window of sensitivity. And it's kind of like if the nodes hold a churning, then there's like a miniature version of bendiness kind of happening in those like first and last quarter points of that angular setup. And so the sun is very perfectly within that bending here on the 2nd of July. And I feel like, would you like to kick us off talking about the Neptune station? I feel like you have been Queen Neptune this last couple of weeks.
Oh my goodness. So, Neptune, it's got the glyph of matter at the bottom, and then it's like they got these aerials that are sort of pointing out. It's very ethereal. It's the dreamscape. It's illusory. It's sort of what even is Neptune, just thinking of King Neptune, the bottom of the sea, like who knows whether it really exists or it does, but it's less like it sort of gets current movement, but it's really the dreamscaping, and it's really, really interesting with this Neptune here. All the lines are moving. That's cute.
Sorry, I moved
No,
my
no, we're just looking in the future of where it's going.
I went to move my screen and didn't realize the lines wouldn't go with it. So that's very perfect,
So
actually.
great. It's so interesting because what I was just about to talk about is where Neptune actually is. Neptune's in its home sign in Pisces. Like, so if you think of Pisces, mutable air that, it's sort of out there in the cosmos, it's expanding. It's the last point of the whole zodiac. So it's like this all-in-oneness sort of elementary point. And Neptune here is right on that last degree, like 29 degrees and 55 minutes. Like there's, it's just so close, like 5 more minutes and we'll be clicking into 0 degree Aries. Like this is so wild. And what happened on was the second, wasn't it? The second at 8:40 p.m. in the evening here in Australia, Eastern Standard Time. Um, it's station retrograde here. So these retrograde energies is the energy, like the planets are the closest to Earth in their cycles. So there's like this whole emphasis on this dreamscape illusion sort of planet that is bearing down on Earth here at this final degrees of Pisces. Like it feels really wild for it to station retrograde so close to that 0 degrees Aries, because that brings a whole different energy to it. And then we will see that in times to come. Aries is cardinal fire as opposed to mutable water. Like you couldn't get any more different. And so this is really, really interesting, this bearing down of the Neptune and the dreaming. And it's like, well, you got to keep dreaming. You got to keep reaching for this unbounded dreaming of possibilities of what could or could not happen. But where's your focus? And I think this is, and I'm looking at the glyph again of Neptune and just thinking of these little spirals that it's got. It's like, well, which timeline are you going to choose? What dreaming are you going to choose to push up and reach for? Because either way you're right. Either way you're right. And this is what that 29 degrees of Neptune is bringing us, and to bear it down and say, yeah, well, you've done all this work, yes, but you got to keep reaching. There's still shit happening out in the world. So what are you choosing? What are you choosing? What are you choosing? And just feeling that, especially with the squares that are happening at the same time, like you can't make the story up. And just thinking of that time spinner again, it's like, well, where you're reaching for, and to keep that focus. And with Saturn here as well, that's calling us to be disciplined in this dreaming. yeah, it feels really powerful, but it's also weird and wacky and um you can't even speaking about it, it's hard to even make sense of it because it doesn't. So it's like that, and it feels like I'm thankful that Saturn's here at this time to really call in this discipline to this dreaming, to the good timelines, too. But you got to keep working at it. You got to have that discipline, respect, and honor um, to do that. So yeah, that is what feels like the Neptune station retrograde, and this is going to continue right through until the 8th of December, and it will station direct at 27 degrees and 7 minutes of Pisces. So it doesn't, it's a slow moving planet, so it really only moves 2 degrees, but it's still. It's off that really sensitive point at 29:55. But I'm just reflecting too on what happened a couple of years ago when I think maybe no, it was 2 years ago when Neptune Station Direct. I had this really wacky experience in my everyday mundane. I was just having my morning cuppa out on the deck, and I just saw the matrix shatter. And I think it was really strange because I went back and looked at the chart because, as you do as an astrologer, you do that. And it was like this wild thing as when that station direct was happening with Neptune, like my whole field of matrix just shattered. And it's hard to even describe because it is Neptune, but it's like I saw the past, the future, and everything in between, just like, it was like the illusion of everything I've been taught was just nonsense. It was like, oh wow, it was a weird moment, but it felt like glass shattering. Um, and that's what Neptune brings, I think.
Yeah, so much so. And one of the ways of conceptualizing the outer planet, so the planets past Saturn, so that's Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, is that and the reason for that is because they can't be seen with the naked eye. I think that there are little moments in time where you can glimpse Uranus depending on how close it is to the Earth, but as a general rule, it's up to Saturn that we can see with the naked eye. And so Saturn holds the boundary of our material, human, earthly realm, and anything beyond that is very transcendental, otherworldly, and outside of the material realm of human experience. And so when we are trying to conceptualize, what does Uranus do, or what does Neptune do, and how does that come through, and how do we feel that's why it kind of shifts and it can be hard to really grasp is because it's not supposed to be completely material or completely human. It's other, it's outside of that realm of experience. And all I can think of with Neptune at this place is the birth portal, and of literally going through labor and birthing, and like this critical moment here where the birth hasn't happened yet, but you're on the edge of that. And like in so many ways, the birthing person's only job is to surrender more and more deeply at this point. And that's that Pisces thing of like, literally opening, literally dilating, literally expanding more and more, doing the dance between you and this other being, because it's not just you doing the work, it's the small person doing the work too, and being available for the conversation happening there. And this 29-degree mark, it's the like pre-pushing dance that
Yeah.
happens with birth. And there is an opportunity here with Neptune at this sensitive point to really remember how important that surrendering dance is. It's not just about the pushing and having the baby on the other side. And I think that our state of birth in the world, and particularly in Australia, is such a good narrative of understanding this, is that I think we have this very Aries model focus of like, let's just get you contracting and get the baby out and get you started on that journey of motherhood. And the thing is, like, labor is what sets you up for all the pain relieving hormones, all the feel good hormones. It helps you bond with your baby once they're here. It helps you breastfeed your baby once it's here. And if we skip that dance, then we really do just get thrown into the fire of I'm doing, I'm tending, I'm caring, I'm got to do this, I got to do that, of the more action material base needs that Aries covers it of like, what do I need moment to moment? Whereas the Pisces is like, what are the bigger things at play that set me up for when I have to show up in my I amness in Aries? And I wonder if there's an opportunity here for those of us. Well, you know, you're here listening to this, so you're obviously showing up for this kind of work, but there's such an opportunity here to lean into what it is to truly surrender to what is showing up. And this is a small example for myself of being sick this last couple of weeks. I truly haven't been sick like that in a long time. And I have had so many things I haven't been able to do, and I've had to just keep on bowing to, like, you know, not showing up to certain responsibilities or expectations. And I just have to keep rewriting that and be like, it's okay that I can't do that right now. It's okay that I have to say no to this person right now. To just be with how my body moves. Like, we were going to try and record this yesterday, and about halfway through preparing, I just said, I actually can't do this today. Like, I'm so brain fog. Like, what's that glyph again? Like, I literally just couldn't focus, you know, and to break out of this very human construct of time of like, but we're scheduled to do the thing today, and you're a bad girl for not doing the thing at the appointed time, and this is late. Like, we're really, and remembering too, Saturn went retrograde in Pisces only a couple of days before this. So there is such an opportunity to rewrite that sense of what comes before the birthing moment, and that we really need to bring our energy and attention and compassion to that part of the cycle too, if we truly want to enter the beginning of the next cycle well. And we get to learn how to do that now, before Neptune comes back here to this point next year and crosses that threshold for good for like, what, 100 odd years?
Yeah. Yeah, God, I love that birthing analogy, and it's so true. Like, the state of birth in Australia is just sickening. It really is, and it is very much of an Aries thing. And you know, just reflecting on that state of affairs and what we have now, this opportunity that while we are still in the birthing process, the baby's not here yet. That's why we have to keep working and keep moving and keep trusting. And going back to that key word of what we spoke about for July is trusting, even though we can't see the thing yet, that it is happening, but we just got to keep surrendering, keep journeying, keep opening, keep breathing. Like, it's all about that, because, you know, once this Neptune and Saturn move into Aries, you know, there's no opportunity to really do that. It's game on, right? Like, it's just a cardinal fire. It's the spark to get moving. So this is so important, this point. It's so, so important. And you know, for the next, you know, 6 months or whatever, you know, this is it. Like, you know, this is it. Like, we've been building for this for a while. This is not new information. And yes, we're probably getting all fucking tired. You know, as you do in labor, you know, you get to that point that it's like there's nothing else to do but surrender into the process. And this is the point that we're at. And to keep that in mind when you just like, just got to stop. I just got to breathe. I just got to eat. I just can't do this thing right now. Like, you know, that's a part of the process to stop, to breathe, you know, take some time out, you know, just thinking of that Neptune as well. It's like out of sight, like you can't see it, you know, but to know that it's whatever you're birthing is happening, you just can't see it, but it requires trust and surrender into that. Yeah.
And I think another thing that pulls in that birth narrative so beautifully is that Neptune also rules things like ideals and idealism and fantasy, and illusion, and there being a big difference between what we want or what we hope for and what is. And so this surrendering to what is and showing up for the birth doesn't necessarily look like your perfect idea of how you think that should go. And that's part of the point, you know. This isn't, we're not saying that, this dance always looks a certain way. The whole point of this is like, what are you being asked to surrender more deeply to, and doing it that way, as someone who started attempting a home birth and ended up with an emergency C-section 30 odd hours later. I had a very empowered birth where I just had to keep surrendering and keep showing up. It was no less, that Neptune dance than any other experience. And just feeling really important that we are shattering any Neptunian illusion of that dance should look a certain way. It doesn't mean you don't sweat your balls off. It doesn't mean you don't ugly cry for half of it. It doesn't mean you're not suffering at the same time. And that's the point. It's the showing up to it all as it is, and being willing to do it anyway. Like, can I show up to this even with, and just the deepening of that dance. And sometimes the dance is really fast and you miss a step, and sometimes it's really slow when you want it to pick up its pace. But it's, surrendering to what is and being willing to move with that. We're really getting a schooling in that, I think, and just needing to be really careful that our sense of how something should be doesn't get too muddled with what is or what the potential is, and so that we really stay open to lots of different forks in that crossroads.
Absolutely. And I'm just thinking, if you thought about where you're at now, 20 years ago or 10 years ago, you wouldn't even imagine of where you're at now. Like, how can you possibly limit yourself to what you think things should look like now? If you go back to, into the future 10 years and look back, and it's like, oh, there would be no way you would even predict or even dream of where you're at. So that dreaming there too, and that not setting yourself limits. I mean, it's in Pisces, there is no limits, but it can certainly be like that with Saturn there. And this is the great thing about astrology. We can look at the terrain, then see and surrender to what is happening, but then also we can, guide ourselves to of how we approach it. And, so we're not so affected by what's happening. We're bringing ourselves out more in the cosmic realms and going, right, I see this as potential, I see this as playing out, but how can I navigate this knowing this information? That classic thing is knowledge is power. And also just thinking of coming back to birth, and what our teacher Jane Halbert Collins always says, that what happens at the start of a cycle sets the scene for the rest of the cycle. We're just in the void space. This is the void. That 29-degree, like Pisces, is the void. Like, we're in the void. This is where the magic happens. This is where the cauldron is, with all the things and all the things that we're stirring around, but we haven't dished it up yet. We haven't birthed the baby yet. So this void is a very, very, very powerful place in the darkness of the womb space, where things are growing. And to know that whatever's happening at this time sets a tone for the rest of the cycle. So it's such an important and powerful piece at this point, because once the cycle starts, we can change things, yes, but it gets harder as the cycle continues. It's just like, how you start off as a child, and, whether you're being deeply nourished and fed and whatever as a child, by the time you're an adult and you're moving into middle age, if you didn't get the nourishment that you needed, there can be problems later on. And, there's a part of life, yes, but how can we avoid some problems later on now, so we don't have to go through all that? Like, if we can, and we've got this wisdom and knowledge, well, why wouldn't we do that? So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that there's just two quick last things I want to drop at the end here too. Like, it really is so important. And I feel like we've spoken to this every episode so far, and, I'm starting to feel like a broken record. But part of the reason why this theme is so stretched and is happening for so long is because Neptune takes what, like 100 years, 110 years to do an entire lap of the zodiac. This isn't just like a dreaming for the new job you hope to have this year. This is a generational dreaming. This is deeply generational. Neptune will not be here again in our lifetimes. Maybe not even in our children's quite
Yeah.
likely not in our children's lifetimes. Like this is our great grandchildren and great great grandchildren who are going to be experiencing the next time Neptune is in this place. So don't be surprised if this isn't necessarily coming through in the day to day. This may not feel obvious and in your face, and it's not supposed to, but that's the theme is what it is because of the way these outer planets are set up and spaced over these few signs from Aquarius to Taurus means that no matter where these faster moving planets go, there is a conversation happening somewhere with one of these big transcendental strange outer planets. And so this truly is a generational dreaming, and so that's why we keep repeating ourselves of like, don't hold yourself back for what you hope for. Like, be brave enough to hope for something that you know isn't going to happen in your lifetime. And that's the kind of dreaming that we have an opportunity to lean into here. And we'll be able to do that, like Yvonne said, a million other times over the coming 100 years. It's not like this is the only moment, but this is a very potent moment to be intentional with.
Absolutely. So 165 years. So, Neptune won't be back here at this point for another 165 years. So, yeah, very much is a generational spell, a generational dreaming, not for us, but for our great grandchildren. Like, if we're thinking of the opposition of when Neptune comes into, Libra there, I won't be here. When this full illumination of whatever is happening now, I won't be here. Like, my children, maybe my grandchildren, yes, but it's not for me. This is the dreaming for them. This is the dreaming now for them, and this is why it's like just so fucking important. I just can't stress that enough. Like, I'm really feeling that. It's like, what kind of world do you want to leave your great grandchildren? What is being fully illuminated now? What good parts of life? What the beauty and the things that you want to sing up, you know, for it to be fully illuminated, in, whatever time, was it 60, 70 years time?
And that generational scope, like you don't have to know the ins and outs. Don't worry
No.
about the details. Lean in. That's the whole point of the Pisces Neptune thing, right? And with Saturn being there too, it's an opportunity to bring maturity and seriousness to this wide open thing. Like, what do you want it to feel like? What do you want it to sense like? Like, what do you hope for? And that's the dreaming thing,
Mm.
right? And yeah, the last thing is that like Pisces is so collective. We're not doing this dreaming alone. This is a collective dreaming. And that's why it's so important that we all show up to do that, because the world's a fucking shit show. The world's a fucking shit show right now. And it's partly because there are all of these changes afoot and the shit's churning.
And we've got to
And
see it. So we're just, everything's being
yeah.
dug up to be seen, but we choose
Mhm.
now of what we choose to move forward with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that's the thing. Like, we're Pisces is that collective water. It's such a humanitarian sign. It's not about the individual, and really dreaming into not just what we hope for ourselves and our grandchildren, but what do we hope for others? What do we hope for the whole world? What do we hope for the soil, for the birds, for the clouds? Like, what do we hope for this entire sentient rock and cosmos that we live in? This is truthfully, this is a wonderful 12 months to
It's
be
a
thinking
really,
about that up
yeah.
until the point that Neptune and Saturn move together. And because with Saturn coming through those doors next year into Aries with Neptune together, Saturn brings the materiality to that. So don't doubt that
Ah,
Saturn is weaving the material magic to carry these prayers over. And again, prayers we quite possibly will not see in action in our lifetime. We are
mm.
doing this work for those who come next. Like, we're planting the acorns for the oaks that our great grandchildren will climb and sit and read books under. It's not for us. And that's a very Pisces theme too, of the thinking about the greater good and leaning into well-being for all.
Yeah, and I just wanted to I just did some quick calculations. And so by the time that Neptune goes into Libra, so when there's an opposition to wherever Neptune is now, that's 82 years. So 82 years from now there will be the full illumination of whatever's happening, and then after that will be the harvest. But also, interestingly enough, like 82 years is pretty much the Uranus cycle. And so next time Uranus is back in Taurus will be when this reflection is happening too. So there's something about this Earth realm that is being changed and shifted now, and that harvest of that cycle as well. So there's cycles upon cycles of these outer planets. It's so fascinating to me that that will be happening at that time. It's just again another a piece of evidence to just say how potent these times are.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Before was there I think that we'd also just wanted to mention that, yeah, this is within a couple of hours of Mercury ingressing into Leo at this time. So the planet of communication, of thought processes, of analysis of data, moving out of the watery, intuitive, emotional realm of Cancer and into the expressive, bright, sparky realm of Leo. So in early July, Mercury is really shifting his communication from the heartfelt to the bold. That's happening just a couple of hours later on this chart. And yeah, as we said, I think we've probably spoken enough to the strangeness of the times, but we do see the sun here at the nodal bendings, and that's a really warpy, distorting bit of strangeness. So if you're reflecting back on early July and there was just some strange, inexplicable shit going on, don't worry, you were doing it right. You're just the product of the stars, as we all
That's
are.
the time spinner element.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really interesting with this Mercury also ingressing into Leo, and it comes into opposition to Pluto, which will happen for Venus and in the Sun too this month. We first get this glimpse of what does it look like with Pluto in Aquarius, which will stay here for 20 odd years, and have oppositions to it as the planets move into Leo. So it's a totally different energy to what it was with Cancer and Capricorn. And if you've got planets or points in Cancer and Capricorn, well done. Almost there. So friggin' close. We've got a couple of months of it when Pluto moves back into Capricorn. But what for anybody, if you go to where Cancer is in your chart and Capricorn is in your chart, I guarantee there's been some kind of shifting and changing, and it's so phenomenal. Like I've got Cancer in my first house and Capricorn in my seventh, and it's where my whole marriage and stuff just changed and shifted, and now being spat out the other end, and the landscape is so different on that relationship seventh house stuff. It's so friggin' interesting. So, have a look where Leo is in your chart and have a look where Aquarius is in your chart, because they're going to be the points for the next point of transformation. And this is the first little glimpse of what that looks like with Mercury ingressing into Leo.
Yeah, so as these planets move into Leo, right at this first degree here in that opposition with Pluto, yeah, we're going to get that first little taste for the next 20 years. Whenever these planets move into Leo, what is that going to look like? So if you have significant things in Leo or Aquarius, pay attention. Leo's my first house. I'm going to be listening, and just get a feeling of what happens when these planets are as far away from Pluto as they can be, and they start reflecting and illuminating more fully the stories that were seeded in that earlier part of the cycle with the conjunction. So definitely work as Anana does, putting her ear to the ground and listening for Ereshkigal in the great below, to get a sense of what's calling from down there, because this is a 20-year journey, and this is the first little whispers of a more seeable illuminated part of that cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if you're a journaler, like start journaling, like start
Mm.
putting these transit in and start watching this. It's so as your own data research. And if you would like to join our Patreon and our paid tiers, you actually get a worksheet for these transits as well. So you can follow that as a paid member. And a big shout out to our paid members of our Patreon. Thank you so much. We're deeply grateful, and I hope the worksheets and the electional charts are really supporting you at this time. And we are so grateful for you all. Thank you. Thank you. Mm.
Oh, so much so. And those worksheets are such a gift. Like the work is just done for you, and you can just do as much or as little as you like. But then you also start collecting the evidence of each month that goes by, that you can look back and go, oh, what happened the last time that Mercury was in Leo for me? Or what happened the last time X went retrograde? And you can look through then
Mm.
your own wealth of information of your own recordings and make little notes to future self of next time this happens, don't leave the house or whatever.
I think that comes up a lot in this month. We're not leaving the house this day. This weekend we're
Yep.
staying home. Um, yeah,
Yep.
so yeah, this bank of evidence that you can get by doing the worksheets or journaling or taking notes. You can gather data for yourself. It's such a Virgo thing, but it's handy to have because you can go back and reflect on, oh, that's what's happening at the seeding of that transit, right? And then you can watch it shine and come into full illumination, the harvest of it. So it's really powerful to be doing that.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I think let's just take a short intermission and we'll both be back in a second.
Beautiful.
We're back.
We're back.
Let's have a look at the new moon in Cancer on the 6th of July at 8:57 a.m. AEST.
Yes. So Cancer, cardinal water, ruled by the moon. So this new moon was ruled by the actual moon itself. So, which brings a
Mm.
very powerful point when we've got the moon in its home sign, creating again this newness of what we've been talking about. And this cardinal water energy, it's like the womb waters, so much birthing talking about here in
Mm.
this reading. It's so interesting this new moon, which is the start of a new cycle, at the, here in the Southern Hemisphere, at the point of just winter solstice, which is the birth of a whole yearly Earth cycle. It's a very powerful time, again, like what we just spoke about this Neptune and this birthing at a void point of, what is the dreaming for not only the next 4 weeks of this lunar cycle, but also what is the dreaming of, you know, of the next 12 months, this cardinal water dreaming, what is sitting in your womb waters, being birthed and cultivated at the moment. And, dark moon, it is the void. We can't see it, but we can certainly, feel it and dream it and call it in as a part of this magic spell working that is happening at this time. It's a really powerful time. With this new moon and happening at 14 degrees. I mean, it's the middle decan. It is something that we've already been working at. It feels like what we just spoke about that labor. We've been working at it. We know it's here. But it's not the end picture, but we're working at it. We're moving through the labor of it. So whatever's come up at this new moon, it feels like it's not necessarily a new dreaming, but it's a dreaming that maybe has got another level of it, or something has come in that adds to it at this point in time. But it's the middle piece. It's the middle piece of the dreaming.
Yeah, and I think that, it's a Mercury ruled little slice of Cancer here too. So what new things are coming through in the felt sensations of your body? Like what kind of new ways is your body in that like intuitive, watery, felt sense? What new communications are coming through at this time? that again may not feel totally clear on a verbal conscious level, but I deeply felt like, what do you know really fully, that might be related to a new beginning or of putting down some roots at this new moon. And you know, the bendings are just happening at like the late 10-degree mark. So this new moon is fresh out of that strange nodal space. So this may be a time where, yeah, things do come through in novel ways where you just know something new has to begin, or you just know that something has finished and it's time to look at something fresh, but it might come through in a felt sense that is a little more inexplicable.
Mm. Yeah, and what's also happening at this new moon, we've got Venus here squared Chiron as well. So there's something, you know, Venus in Cancer, she's the nurturer, she's the carer. She wants to make sure that everybody's nourished and, you know, and bring that beauty to that great mother love that she's here to provide. You know, Cancer rules the breasts. It is like that life force giving that Venus is here, who's really wanting that. But coming to this square in Chiron, square, you know, Chiron in Aries, you know, it's like, who am I? Like, can I give all that? Like, who am my sense of self here? Like, you know, and there's a wounding that's coming up in that. And I'm just thinking of, you know, a lot of my personal mother wounding has been this maiden who wants to go out into the world and do the things, and but also I have four children. Like there's a mothering element that's there, and it's so interesting because it's like my first house of self is Cancer, and this Aries part of myself that wants to do the career, that wants to do out there. But then there's a whole thing here that's creating tension around this sense of self and who am I, and out in the world and doing my thing. And the wounding there because I can't really fully do that because of the mothering element. And that's certainly what came up during this time because my family got sick. So I had to surrender into that Chiron and say, well, what's the healing of it? Like, can I trust that I will be doing that again soon? But at the moment, you know, this heavy weight of the new moon, the sun, the moon, and Venus all here in this Cancer element. So this tension that's calling for action, and which, what are you feeding, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's very much been my story this few weeks as well too. For me, Cancer is my 12th house. And so I've really felt, at first what I felt was this real melancholy, apathy for a while there, particularly when the sun lit up my 12th house of darkness and the psyche. Like I had a solid week there of real apathy and of not quite being sure why I'm doing anything that I'm doing, and having to reflect that holding, that womb-like holding and nourishing for myself for a while there so that I can show up to mother as well. And you know, something else I found over this time has been, I've been thinking a lot about my own mother, and actually it's her
Mm.
birthday
Oh,
today,
oh,
um, which is very
happy
special.
heavenly birthday.
Yeah, happy heavenly birthday to my mama. She died in 2011, so what is that, 13 years ago? And so like feeling that, you know, these mothering themes of my 12th house, like really coming through, and I've been really thinking about her and reflecting around what in my mothering, either towards my daughter or towards myself or within my family unit, like what if that is an old program. And I'm fairly sure that my mum had postnatal depression and things like that. And I've just been really leaning into trying to connect to her with an understanding of that I couldn't have possibly had before I had my own baby. So for me, like, and look, Cancer stuff always sort of connects to a lot of those themes because it's my 12th house, you know, so it brings things up out of the dark. It's the shadow, it's the subconscious programming that comes from generations before. And so this new moon, I think, is offering a new way of connecting to those things. So depending on what house this is happening in, it will give you an idea of where in the life that could be showing up for you. So yeah, for me, it's really been showing up in the psyche and in old beliefs and old patterns of being. And Yvonne, I can hear it showing up for how you show up in life and what you actually
Yeah.
want to be doing and why you're here and calling things up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm just thinking of that reflection of what you just said about again that evidence of that sun just coming out of the nodal bendings as well as this time of the womb water cancer is so elusive. It's moon, like it's ruled by the moon. Sometimes you see it and sometimes you don't. And this is cancer and also that needing to feel safe to come out and to do that work is really important for that cancer energy. So it's sometimes you see it and sometimes you don't. It really depends on what is happening at the time and where the cycles are at and things like that. And time and space, it is strange. This water element is quite, we it's really that watery. I don't even know how to explain it because of that. How do you explain that? Like how do you explain the womb waters and being that little fetus that's in the womb waters who doesn't really understand what's going on, but it's there and it's been warmth and hopefully nourished, and if it's not being nourished, what needs to happen for that to happen? And this new moon feels like a really good time to look at what is nourishing you,
Mm.
and to dare to nourish self, if you need to, what do you need for your own nourishment so you can come out of and emerge out of this new moon in Cancer season, out of the nodal bendings,
Mm.
going, now I have enough to what I need to do to move into that fiery Leo season and to shine. What do you need to make sure that you're okay in this Cancer season so you can show up in the shiny lights and the fixed fire in Leo? Like this is the time to do that, not in Leo season, because then it's hard. It's harder to sustain, it's fixed fire. But this is the point to do that. It feels like what we just spoke about with Neptune and at those final degrees. It's like this is the time now, not when it's actually happening.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and just really feeling the the opportunity here to reflect on the past and bring your curiosity around what the stories actually are and seeing if you can use your imaginative senses or just that creative what if magic, what if it was actually this way, what if I don't see that in quite the right light. Like I think there's an opportunity with them being so close to the bendings and having this moment of distortion that we get this little glimpse of seeing something differently or catching a glimpse of something that because of our perspective, we wouldn't have been able to see before. Like as a child, as my mother's child, there's only so much of her mothering I got to witness and her experience I get to witness in that. But as a mother myself, I now have this whole different way of being able to assume certain things and just creatively imagine what that experience was for her. And it may not be concrete evidence, but I don't need that. Like it's enough to just lean into what have I perhaps not seen before, and in that very lunar reflective kind of way, weaving in both the nourishment of Venus and the harmonizing of Venus with the old wounds of Chiron, and seeing that the sun and moon are coming into their trine with Saturn. So how again, like how does that time bending, but also the foundations there, how does that set us up to do this work deeply and well and not superficially and just to get through the week, but what kind of stories are coming through now that could seed different ways of regulating ourselves emotionally or of perceiving our own emotional beings.
Cracky. I can really hear the nodal bendings in what you just said. Is just like this
Yeah.
forward and back and future and past and also having this strengthening that vibe of time space continuum, coming with Saturn here in Pisces, and as the planets move through Cancer, they'll continue to trine Neptune and stuff like that, which is exactly what we just spoke about. Like it's really
Mhm.
interesting. And, as we release this, the sun and Venus will still be in Cancer. So, it's still this opportunity to look for that nourishment that needs to happen, lessons learned from the past for the future to sustain us for the next cycle.
And look, this is also, I think, a real opportunity to lean into creativity, like write some sad poetry, pick up your guitar, like do a whole painting just in navy blue. Or don't, have it be all yellows and oranges and reds, whatever. But like this is an opportunity, I think, to sit with what that is in a truly emotional, deeply feeling way, because there's so many watery things happening here.
Mm.
Like not everything is processed with the intellect, and that's a hard lesson for us Western indoctrinated folk to comprehend. And yeah, this new moon, I think, is an opportunity to open a creative doorway or outlet into moving through glimpses of things that you may not have seen before or felt,
It's so
feeling
interesting.
language.
And just hearing what you say that too, we've got sextiles with Mars as well, with Neptune and no, not Neptune, but Saturn in Pisces and Mars
Mm.
in Taurus, but also the sun and and the moon passes past there after the new moon, this 19-degree point, like 19 degrees Saturn in Pisces, 19 degrees Mars in Taurus. And Venus is just past that point, but the sun will move there too as well. So yeah, very, very interesting, this sextile energy, that glimpses of something beginning, and what is it, what little seedlings are you seeing that, that are needing nourishment to grow bigger, or do they need to be pulled out because they're weeds? Like, this is the
Mm.
time.
And just one last point too, I think, is like it's interesting to see that little glimpse of the Mars story happening here with that sextile, because this is around the point here, late Cancer,
Mm,
that Mars will be going retrograde in December.
yes.
So wondering too, like, is something being seeded in Cancer here that is going to get some real heat and challenge at the end of the year? Like, perhaps part of the challenge here now then is to be really honest with what's coming up emotionally, and to not pretend to ourselves or to others about what we need to be well, about how we regulate ourselves or don't regulate ourselves emotionally, and potentially what is Mars going to bring to this place at the end of the year. And this has been happening all year because
Mm,
Mars is behind these faster moving personal planets of the Sun, Venus, and Mercury. It means that the Sun, Venus, and Mercury are kind of pioneering that the first few steps through each sign, and then several months later, that's when Mars is coming through and adding his part of the story in. And so those other planets here, that they're paving the way, and then Mars is going to end up in this place at the end of the year to add his final notes to that story. So again, like do the work now, don't fuck about now, because it's
mm.
going to be more difficult in this little Cancer and Leo area at the end of the year when you're doing it but with inflammation at the same time. Like, you don't want to be doing it with a lurgy. You want to be doing it while you're well and have the time and space to nourish yourself.
Yeah, and just to map that retrograde out, like, because the retrograde happens for a really long time. Like, so the retrograde happens around the 6th of December at 6 degrees of Leo, which is about here, this point here, which is where Mercury is at this point, and it retrogrades back to 17 degrees of Cancer. So, you know, on the 22nd, 24th of February next year. So this little element here for Mars, this is really important to take note of, because this is where a massive review and revising, and it's a really Mars. And remember that retrograde energy is all about the intensification of a planet because of how close it is to the Earth. That's why it has that optical illusion of retrograde, because of how the planets move around Earth. And so this Mars, and it's really interesting, this Mars will be coming up with that conjunction we'll talk about soon in this place with Uranus as well. So there's a bigger cycle, there's a bigger story playing out now, but this is the time to figure out what do we want to take in and what we don't want to take into that retrograde as it gets closer.
Very much so. And even if you just look at it as like this is a moment where this area of the chart, like that Cancer area and Leo, as it will be lit up as well, it's just a moment where that's really lit up, and it's just easier to work in the daylight than it is to work in the dark. It's literally that simple. So when we're talking about bringing our focus to this area, it's just easier when there's other bodies there to reflect on and to get a feeling for the landscape, as opposed to when that's not happening.
Yeah.
So just before we move on to the next chart, it's also worth noticing that on the 12th of July, so what is that, 6 days later, Venus will ingress from Cancer into Leo, and then later that day will make its opposition to Pluto. So again, just talking about that, putting your ear to the ground to see what's being fully illuminated from the underworld at this time in that Venus-Pluto cycle, and that will come to its conclusion about 10 months or so later. So that's the midpoint of the Venus-Pluto cycle happening there as well.
Which started back in February earlier this year too. So this is that full illumination of that Venus and Pluto cycle. And Venus, you know, she is Inanna, she is Ishtar, is the star of Inanna. So she really is listening from above to what is being called to her to attend to in the underworld, into the, you know, what is the dark goddess whispering to you that you can hear to go off and do now. Yeah. And especially just thinking of that Mars going in retrograde, like it just that harvest for Venus to Pluto cycle, you know, is going to have that Mars retrograde in there. So it's even more so to attend to what's happening and what you're hearing, the whispers now, before that intensity comes. It's like tool gathering. What tools are you going to require to take in your backpack to go down to do that realm during that time?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. And so our excuse me, our next chart is for the 15th of July of 2024 at 11:50 p.m. AEST, and it's for the Mars Uranus conjunction in Taurus. So down here we can see both Mars and Uranus at 26 degrees and 19 minutes of Taurus.
Yeah, so we've got Taurus, which is fixed Earth, ruled by the bull, like who is of the Earth. It's like it's here. It's you know, it's hard to move. It likes stability. Mars, the planet of war and action, and you know, just thinking like look at this glyph. It's a circle with an arrow on it pointing out. You know, it's ready for something to do. You know, and we spoke about this earlier of our experience of what that Mars in Taurus has both brought Becky and ourselves. It is a slowing down, it's a plotting, but it also is a frustration that things need to change or things need to move. But it's harder in Taurus. It's fixed Earth coming against, you know, this great outer planet of Uranus, who is the planet of revolution and sudden changes. And, you know, and I was listening to this morning to the Astrology Hub talking about how Uranus spins on a tilted axis, unlike Earth and all the other planets that spin up and down, you know, with the poles straight up and down. The poles are on its side, so like where our equator is. So it's a weird planet that you don't quite know what it's going to come. It's unpredictable. It's change. It's something that needs to shift. And in fixed Earth, which is again, it's not comfortable. It's change in Taurus is like, fuck, what, I thought it was there and it's gone, but I was so used to it being there. Like it's gone. And it feels like, you know, it's like a situation that you may have been, you're in, and you're getting really frustrated about it. And that Mars is like, come on, we need pushing for change, pushing to move. And then all of a sudden this conjunction comes out and something just snaps. And all of a sudden it's done, it's gone. But it's not just done and gone, it's gone. Like it's gone. You can't, it's no longer there. It's gone.
Well, I mean, like you try pushing the bull and forcing it to do something it doesn't want to do, right? I'm just like picturing myself like literally leaning up against the flank of a bull being like, come on, dude, we're trying to go this way, or I've got this in mind, let's put your energy behind this thing, and the bull's just like, not, you may as well be a flea as far as the bull is concerned. And that Mars Uranus moment is like, there's an earthquake and the earth opens up and the bull's gone, or like there's a bird flying through the sky that dies mid-flight and kamikazes down and hits the bull on the head and then the bull's dead. Like, that's the kind of crazy, stupid shit that Uranus can bring. And when Mars and Uranus come together, it's literally explosive. And we've seen things in the past in more mundane astrology where when those things come together, we do see the sudden destruction or toppling of things, whether it's like economic markets, or whether it is like literally the earth trembling, or I think that there was, under a Mars-Uranus conjunction, the last time that there was literally like a storehouse of some flammable substance that exploded and did a lot of damage. I can't remember where, in a city somewhere, but it was like just so on the nose the way that it happened. But yeah, it's like Taurus is so set in its ways. It can be so stubborn, so used to things, like you're saying, Yvonne, so used to things being a certain way. And Uranus does not give two shits about your attachment to how things used to be or how you wish things were. Uranus is chaos for chaos sake, and when Mars comes in there, Mars is like handing the box of matches to Uranus and is like, what should we blow up? And so at the moment, it's just
And to give a little brief sort of history of this cycle of Mars and Uranus in Taurus. So Mars travels every 2 years. So we've seen, this is the third transit of this cycle of Mars and Uranus. The last one was on the 1st of August 2022 at 18 degrees of Taurus, and that was conjunct the North Node exact. I remember that one. That was a big one. And just thinking of, again, that those nodal points and how weird and wacky they can be. And the one previous one was on the 20th of January 2021. And if we think back to what was happening in January 2021, and that was conjunct Black Moon Lilith at 6 degrees of Taurus. So it's really interesting. This is not a new piece of information. This is, we're in the 26-degree mark. We're 4 degrees away from, Uranus moving into Gemini and Mars moving into Gemini. So this is like a repeated story, or an element of a story that's come up again and again. But it's like this time, it's like this new piece of, it's just like something's cracked finally. Like something is moved, and it's like, that's fucking it. I'm done. Like, I've put up with this and I changed this a little bit and that didn't quite work. And here we are fucking again, and that's it. It's done. Yeah.
And thinking too, like, for those of you who have prominent things in Taurus, whether it's a sun, a moon, a rising sign, or a stellium, or if it's one of your angular houses, like the 1st, 4th, 7th, or 10th, Uranus has been like shaking this earth for what, like 6 or 7 years at this point. So again, like, this instability is not a new story. We're coming towards the end of Uranus's time in Taurus over this next, 18 months or so. And so Mars coming in here, it's just the fuel for that change to really happen. So if you've been sort of feeling like something is coming, chances are this is when that trigger gets pulled. And I think that, yeah, because Taurus is typically so sure-footed, so connected to things being maintained over long periods of time, that the invitation here is to allow yourself to be uncomfortable even more deeply than what you would normally. And that can be very triggering for super triggery for Taurian folk, because that maintainable status quo can feel really connected to our literal well-being, like our literal ability to show up to be in the world. That can feel really particularly tricky in this place. So there's an opportunity here to be like, all right, what's been shaking for several years now that actually is ready for a clear out?
Mm.
And rather than trying to direct it in a particular way, just stay open to see what shows itself to you. Like we
Mm.
don't try, like, well, I wouldn't be trying to point this laser in any particular direction. I'm just going to probably lay down somewhere out of the way and wait and see where that laser ends up, and then to work with whatever it is that I see. It's not something that you want to attempt to wrap your hands around and generate, because there can be a backlash, or you can end up hitting something you don't mean to with this kind of conjunction. So sitting back and being willing to look at this uncomfortable instability that's happening, and just doing your best to move with it if and when it happens.
And that's the nature of Uranus too. It's unpredictable. So what you think is going to happen, probably won't. Something else will. So it's just like it's like Mars is just shooting off. It doesn't really know where it's shooting off because, Uranus is a bigger planet. So Uranus is really guiding it, which brings that element of chaos to this conjunction. It's like, well, who knows where the sticks are all going to land, but it's not a time to go off and do anything. It's time to just sit back and wait and watch and then react later on, maybe on the full moon or something like that, but probably not actually, because there'll be another thing to come up there. This next few weeks, it's just, I just saw this image of waiting for the dust to settle, just thinking of that Taurus, and it's like, yeah, this earthquake is coming, things exploded. We're sort of going, fuck, okay, all right. And you can't really see it yet because the dust is all in the air and everything's being churned up. Like we just, it's not a time to charge in the dust that you can't see to go and do things. And you just gotta, because you don't know what is stable and what is not just yet. So you just have to wait and watch and see what happens.
Yeah. To be honest, the image that just came to mind, I can't remember the scientist's name, Back to the Future, like trying to harness the thunder. Doc, of course, he's trying to thunder. Oh God, my words. He's trying to capture the electricity from the thunderstorm to go back in time. And like, credit where credit's due. He worked on that for a lifetime to get to that point, to be able to mess with that thunderstorm. And even then, it didn't go as planned.
It's a great scene.
It's so perfect for this here. And what's also coming to mind is the tower from the tarot. Like for anyone who works with the tarot, if we're doing like a bit of a look ahead, like, oh, I wonder how my week's going to pan out. Oh, it's the tower. Like you don't. Yeah, I don't know that that's the time to rig something to capture the energy of it. It's the time to sit back and be like, all right, I'm going to stay adaptable, and I'm not going to be in fight flight for the whole week waiting for something to happen to me, but I am going to stay regulated and tend myself. And I'm going to be curious about where that lightning chooses to strike. I'm just going to show up to that as best that I can when that happens. But this is it's a tower moment on steroids. And perhaps this is a good segue into talking about the fixed star Algol, which is at 28 degrees of Taurus, which is very, very tied in with this conjunction. Do you want to kick that off?
Yeah, so Algol is the most malefic star or point in the whole zodiac chart, and so any points and planets around this 26-degree point will be activated by that. And so Algol is Medusa's head, who was the maiden who went into he was lured into Athena's temple by Poseidon, and Athena didn't just jealous or whatever happened, as these Greek myths go, and Perseus came and chopped off her head. It's so tragic and so violent and bloody, and she became, her head with the snakes was put on the shield for Athena to go through into battles. So there's such a bloody and violent story that's here. But it's interesting because Medusa became unwillingly became like this power figure of battle with through Athena's shield. And so if you stood in front of Medusa's shield, you would be struck into stone, but you were also protected if you stood behind it. So there's a whole thing. It feels it's related also to like the Menart story. It's like this whole thing about not wanting to grow up, or this thing of um and all of a sudden you start bleeding and there's a bloody violent element to that, and then all of a sudden you come into this power, but it's not through your own making. It's not through something that you may wanted, for example. So there's a whole story tied around Algol and Medusa, around this power play of the feminine, and what you're choosing here is can either be bloody violence, or it can be, trusting that there's a protection here, or you're sort of coming into battle. So yeah, it depends on what, again, like all astrology, what you choose here is very powerful. Like it's poignant anyway, because already you've got that Mars and Uranus fire and unpredictability, but then you bring in this feminine who is either raging and uncontrollable, and with bloodied violence dripping from her teeth and her hair of snakes, or you're going, okay, I can see all that unfolding, and I'm choosing again this invitation to sit back and wait and just sort of go, I'm just going to stand behind the shield and just watch the unfolding of all of this.
Yeah, I think the key words that come to me is primordial fury.
Mm.
It's a really the level of rage and pain is completely disembodied from a conscious, compassionate, directed by will state. Like that's not at all what we're talking about. It's not like being angry with someone for doing a thing. It's completely unleashed rage. And where the way that we can find astrological moments to go, oh, that's a moment, is when we see things repeat themselves. And so we can see Mars in detriment in Taurus feeling a bit frustrated and having like hot energy, not really feeling like it's got the right place to go, and that shit can build up and fester. And then we have the meeting between Mars and Uranus, which is super, like that's dynamite. It's super
Mm.
explosive. It's yeah, the lighting of the dynamite. And then we have that happening at this very potent, malefic point with the Algol star, that yeah, it does have this primordial rage. But I think it's important to remember too that that too has its place.
Mm. Mm.
That too has its place. And I think that the world at large has a need for deep primordial feminine rage at the moment. And there's only so much preparation you can do for a moment like that. And that's kind of, I think, what the tower speaks to too, is
Mm.
like you don't know exactly how or where that's going to hit or what you're going to need. You just do the best that you can when you're in it. And so yeah, this is a stay at home for 24 hours. So
Yeah.
this is happening exactly very late on the 15th of July on a Monday night. But basically for that Monday and Tuesday, I would just be staying home and keeping my loved ones close. And
Mm.
perhaps another invitation is if you feel threads of anger or rage coming up, is to just notice what you notice with that, and you just bring your awareness as much as you can to it, because some of it may be needing to come up and out, and some of it may take you somewhere you don't mean for it to go, depending on how you follow that thread and that pathway. But there, yeah, I think it's important to recognize that the story has the terrible injustice and the pain of Medusa's story of her being, like the most beautiful maiden, and then that,
Mm.
she got turned into this gorgon, and her beautiful hair that she was famous for being turned into the snakes. Like that, there really is that element of suffering and of her being persecuted for something that was not her fault.
Mm.
and like she did nothing wrong. And then on the other hand, um, recognizing that sometimes that primordial rage is extremely protective and
Mm.
necessary as well, and that both of those stories can exist at the same time.
Absolutely. And I'm just thinking it's something coming up here about tools as well, considering I'm just thinking of that shield as a tool and to know when you are, when we're in this, when we all will be, is to know before we go. Again, there's a theme there coming up about what do you need before you go into battle or before these things happen, to know what your tools are. And this is why it's important to do, the shadow work and all the rest of it, consciously, so we are prepared for when things like that come out of the blue or suddenly or unexpectedly, that we can go, oh, I have this tool and that tool at my disposal, and I can use that. So, in the lead up to next week, which is Monday the 15th, to know what are your tools that can help that fierce rage of the feminine, to keep her safe and her family safe, and to, what do you need to, process it, whatever's coming up, like, whether it be going out to the forest and screaming your head off or whatever, like, and just thinking of Medusa here, or, something that you've got to that can move the anger and the rage, but it's done in a way that is safe. So,
Mm.
that feels really, really important to come in with that consciousness as we come into this transit, to know what our tools are at our disposal, that we can allow that to happen without harm. Because the flip side of that, this potential of harm is great. It really can be super tragic. And Uranus here, it's just like it's gone. Like whatever happens, whatever's changing, it's changing for good. It's like a permanent change. It's an outer planet. Like it's gone. It's like what you said about the bull. It just sort of dies and that's it. It's gone. Like there's no coming back from whatever happens. So how do we come into that knowing our tools that will keep us safe and held and supported, but still process and allow for that rage, that's coming up, to be processed. So it's really, really important to do that, and to come from it from a conscious element. I'm just thinking of, Uranus is also a higher octave of Mercury. It's sort of this reflection of this greater collective Mercury at play here. But in this really loud sense. So, whatever's coming up, whatever's being called to change, on some level, it will be for a higher purpose. But how does Algol, the fierce, dark feminine, who is fucking so, like, I can feel it as I'm talking, like she's in the pit of my belly, like, just ready to fucking unleash. But how do we do that where everybody's safe and held? Because if it's not, it can be, it has the potency to be really super tragic because of the sharp, permanency of what Uranus brings.
I wonder, like listening to your words too, I wonder if it's also okay to bow to that there are some things that can't be fully held in a safe
Mm.
way, and like bowing to that at the
Mm.
same time, like of course setting things up to be as safe and held as possible. And even like if you can just bring yourself down from 80% rage to 60% rage, then that is fucking excellent. Your fireworks. Oh my God.
Talk about
I
Uranus.
hate this shit. I don't know how to turn this off.
Do it again for the people at home.
I will not. I
I
shan't.
can't do it. Oh, please. That was fun. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
But like with me moping in the front of it, that's the only way that can go.
That's how you're
Oh.
gonna go through the 15th. Just going, there's fucking fireworks happening behind me and I'm in the dark. So I'm just gonna sit here and just allow it just to all just crack off, and nothing I
Oh.
can do about it. That is so funny. Talk about tangible magic.
I'm feeling some serious primordial fury about my Zoom
I
settings right
know,
now.
exactly.
Um, and yeah, so what I wanted to, yeah, I think that like it's also really okay, because that happens too. It also
Mm.
happens, and we're seeing that in the world of just terrible harm. And I think the point is to make sure that we are furious as much as we can about the right things. And
Yeah,
that's the part in
that's
the
it. The
safe way. Like,
consciousness.
yeah, and again, like
Mm.
there's only so much that can come in with Algol. The whole point is its headlessness. It's not, that's not available. And
Mm.
so you can only do the best that you can do in that. And
Mm.
I think a big part of the story too is to remember that it's less about the moment and the tragedy. That's not true. I think that it's important to remember that there's a bigger story, and that the
Yeah.
story isn't just the tragedy, it's also the repair, and the compassion that can only be instigated through that level of fury. And what I'm really feeling is um, we are witnessing atrocities happen in the world that requires primordial fury for change. Nothing
Mm.
less is going to change the cycles that we are in. And it is that primordial feminine fierce fury, which needs to defend and protect life, and those who cannot defend and protect themselves. That is a primordial rage that is completely necessary. And so I wonder if there is something that occurs at this time which elicits that level of fury and rage, where we shouldn't have to think about it first. Like it's that's okay too. And yeah,
Mm.
like even though the moment itself may be not conscious, and to not be fueled by compassion, the if we think of it as being scales, like the subsequent amount of love and compassion that can
Mm.
be poured in towards that tragedy is a part of that bigger story too. And to not forget the terrible thing that occurs, to not forget Medusa's story and only see her as the head on the shield that protects, like holding room for both.
Mm,
I think
absolutely.
it's
And I'm
part
just
of it too.
looking at where the moon is too. Moon's in Scorpio that will create an opposition to this just afterwards. You can't make this stuff up. And talking about the primordial, the life force energy is still in Cancer. It is still that primordial, womb water space. So, and that moon in Scorpio, like you can't make it up. Like that is a deep, transformative, emotional body that is moving through the sky, that's bouncing off that at the same time. Like you
Mm,
can't make that up. So
yeah.
even more is just like it's going to call in something really deep here. But yeah, still with that womb water life force energy pulsating again, like I think exactly what you just said, that primordial energy that comes in from the depths, and it's just like, oh, it's really gritty and meaty. But again, going back to what we said earlier about just waiting for the dust to settle as much as you can, to see where the land lies, because we can't predict, we're not going to be able to predict whatever it is going to happen.
Mm.
But just come with it with consciousness. I was about to say something too. Oh yeah, thing is to, like, if you do have to go out during this time, is to allow extra time for unexpected changes, and so that energy of that primordial rage doesn't come out through road rage or something like that. Just and allow that time for unexpected changes in your movements to happen. Mm.
And yeah, just bringing that little bit of extra room that, we are not all individuals experiencing this as like, this is my sky and I'm going to feel this on this day. Like this is energy that's going to be available to the world on this day. So also just bringing as much flexibility as you can muster for that other people may be feeling the pressure of this as well. And yeah, like that is literally just the best that you can do when you don't know what that's going to look like. It's just to bring as much understanding as you can and be like, all right, there's a guy shaking his fist at me in the other car and I could shake it back, but I know that's just going to fuel the primordial rage of us both. So, like just
Mm.
doing the best that you can with what's happening. And to see this Mars ruled moon
Mm.
in a place, and the moon in Scorpio, it's in its fall. that has the potential to carry pain and suffering within it, and to need more resources than normal to know how to regulate itself at that time. And so if anything, that's just reflecting what's already happening with Mars, Uranus, and Algol anyway. And it's just a deeper level of permission again to really feel the hard stuff and to really connect with what is it that you are furious about?
Yeah,
Like,
I'm just
where
looking
is your fury?
really interesting too with the moon in the sun's decan of Scorpio and the sun in the moon's decan of Cancer. Like
Mm.
there's something there too of this reflection back and forth and exactly what you just said is like if you know whatever's happening into the world, come back to that sun compassion of that moon in Cancer, you know, to go, oh, where is that within me? Like we're all under this same sky. We're all experiencing these transits to bring that compassion of other and self back into this space.
Yeah, very much so.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, and at this time too, you know, the sun is conjunct Chiron, and look, I don't always weave Chiron so deeply into my own practice with like transit readings like this, but when we're talking about the luminaries and the nodes, Chiron was so perfectly enmeshed in the eclipse in Aries that occurred 3 months ago that we need to continue to watch how the sun and the moon weave Chiron into the stories that are happening at this time. So even though Chiron is in conjunct Mars and Uranus, so Mars and Uranus, from an aspect perspective, there's no conversation opening there. We do still just see this eclipse story pulling the Chiron wounding and medicine through here too. And also Aries is Mars ruled. So whatever is going on in Aries and Scorpio can be gently or more subtly imported at this time as well.
Mm. And
Um,
also that trine with Mercury to Chiron too, that happens just after this as well, something to take note of too, of, you know,
mm,
whatever we see the dust settle from whatever happened a couple of days later, to be aware that there's an easy flow between the wounded healer and Mercury, the communicator in Leo with the fire.
I'm wondering that the last thing that's coming up for me here is wondering to think of this not just from the perspective of, well, what might I get ragey about, but
Mm,
um, how can we hold ourselves in the face of the rage of others, you know? And it's making me think of, um, especially with social media, like tone policing and like, oh, she's so angry, you know, like, you know, just be a bit nicer, or, you know, you don't have to, you said you used the wrong word in that sentence. And now I'm feeling like really personally insulted by your rage. Like, can we also make room for the rage in the world that actually has a rightful place and is completely necessary to carry us in to the state of compassion and love
mm,
that we all hope for? Like, we need rage to find peace, actually, because the longer that no one is raging, nothing happens, nothing changes, nothing
mm,
gets done. And so, yeah, like, can we be aware of what may come up for us for this, but can we also make more space for the rage in the world and bow to that and just
mm,
see each other in that? Like, I see you in your sacred fury, and not needing to agree and not needing to also feel it the same way. It doesn't have to
mm,
look the same, you know, but that's something that I'm feeling a call to lean into. Is like, can I offer my um, I don't want to say encouragement, but can I offer my support just in that sacred circle of I hear you and I see you in your sacred rage? I think that that could be a really beautiful practice, because, of course, what we give out, we receive as well. So by being able to be more tolerant and open to the rage of others, I dare say that we will find that same deeper tolerance in ourselves as well.
yeah, absolutely. And that Chiron square the sun, you know, being the wounded healer, that's calling for action for us to become that healer, you know, to say, yeah, exactly what you said. I see you and I see me, and we're all a part of this oneness that is here, and we're all experiencing this. So, you know, how do we hold that for each other and, you know, bring the life force, the sun into it to become the
Yeah.
healer of it.
So much so, like what are each of our individual responsibilities to the collective, and what gifts do we bring, and what wounds might get triggered, but holding that all at the same time and not prioritizing one or both, because the more aware and loving and tending we are with our own hurts, the better people we are out in the world. Like, what a different world this would be, if more of us had the capacity to self-tend and self-reflect, and so that Sun Chiron with this square here, it's really like, okay, how can I move forward with this medicine from here?
I think you just described what Saturn in Pisces is all about. That accountability and that responsibility of the collective. Can we show up to this Saturn who's in retrograde, that's bearing down, that's pushing, it's actually a call to do that. Yeah, it's so funny how it's all interconnected, and it's, yeah, that call to eldership, to hold, it all, and to honor it and to respect it. Yeah.
Oh, so much so. And that's the thing, right? You don't that's why the repetition in astrology is so magical and so important, is because it's not just one thing saying a thing. It's the whole story that conspires to bring us to a point. And when we see so many aspects repeating that story in same but slightly nuanced ways, that is where we can truly, pinpoint a thing and recognize how much it permeates our lived experience.
Right.
All right. So next up, we have the moment in time in which Mercury enters its retrograde shadow. And
Mm.
so we have Mercury in Leo here at 21 degrees and 24 minutes. And so what this point is referring to is that over the next few weeks, Mercury will be moving part the area of the zodiac where it will be retrograding. So Mercury will go retrograde on the 5th of August at 4 degrees of Virgo, and will then start retrograding, so moving back over that territory to this same degree again, 21 degrees of Leo, on the 29th of August. So most of August we'll have Mercury in retrograde. And while Mercury moves through that terrain that it will be repeating, that's what we call the retrograde shadow, we're going to start to get the first glimpses of what is going to come up for us during this retrograde. So what terrain are we moving through? What kind of flags are we seeing that are going to only like wave more violently as the retrograde kicks off? And it's like, me, look here, like this is the terrain, this is the area. And so, yeah, it's a good time to just notice what we notice, but also just to notice that Mercury is going to start slowing down over this next couple of weeks. And so that normally erratic, fast-paced Mercury, the fieriness of conversation, how great it is when technology works the way that it should, like, that can start to slow down and falter. And then as Mercury goes retrograde is when we can start to see those things not work as we hope or need or expect them to.
Yeah, and it's really, really interesting at this point of the shadow of the Mercury retrograde. We've still got this Mars and Uranus playing out, and it's like this is maybe the time when we start to see the dust settle, and we're like taking note. And then by the time, by the end of the month, we're like, oh fuck, that's actually got to change now. We've got to go back and review that because of what happened here a couple of days before. So this is a story that's still very much connected, that will continue on, and it will continue on for like, at least 2 years next time. But next time Mars and Uranus meet will be in Gemini. But it's just really interesting that how this Mercury retrograde is coming off the back of that. So it's like what we thought it was, what we thought that changed or needed to change, and we've come in and we've said something, is actually not going to be the case. It'll be something different. And so how very Uranus of, in thinking again that higher and that collective sort of mercurial element of Uranus, and that personal, of Mercury. It's just like, as more, it's like more information comes to us as Mercury crosses that shadow zone, and then we have to, when it, by the time the end of the month comes, we're like, we've got more information that we didn't know that we had, and we have to go back and reassess based on whatever we received during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's even more deeply shown by that, Mars is going to be moving into Gemini on the 21st of July. So, like 4 days later, Mars will move out of Taurus and into Gemini, which Mercury rules. Mercury has rulership of Gemini. And so, for I imagine pretty much the entire retrograde, Mars
Mm.
is going to be in Mercury ruled Gemini, ruled by a Mercury in retrograde. So we're really like this Mars is really causing some trouble at the moment. Like Mars in Aries in its full power, it had the North Node amplifying it and egging it on. It's like, go on, mate, do it, do it, do it. And then we have Chiron there, which, just brought so much potential for not just an amplification of suffering, but like an openness to the suffering that's
Mm.
already there. Like not just
Mm.
more suffering, but also, oh shit, I didn't realize this was here. And then Mars moves into a place of being disempowered and its detriment in Taurus. And now we have this explosive shit going on with Uranus. And then it's like, oh, now Mars is going to move into Gemini. And Mars is neither here nor there about Gemini. And then like a week later, Mercury is ruling that from a position of retrograde. And so there's just all these different ways in which Mars is able to make trouble, whether it's because he's got more power than he needs and he can do what he wants, or because he's feeling disempowered and disenfranchised, and is willing to make everybody suffer as a
Yeah.
result. So yeah, like Mars is really able to kick up some shit. And then Mars moves into Cancer, and that's a whole other story
Mm.
because that's where it's at its fall. It's where the retrograde will be happening. So Mars is like just really has the capacity to stir up trouble at
Absolutely.
this year. Really, it's a
Yeah,
whole year,
this year
actually,
it's a
isn't it?
whole year. It really,
Yeah.
really is, and it's just, this is just a part of that more information that we're gathering in preparation for that Mars to go retrograde, as we spoke about before, and how interesting that we've got this trine that happens not long after this shadow ingress into in Mercury into its shadow. This trine, this 160-degree between the Chiron in Aries, which is a Mars ruled sign, and in Mercury in the decan of Mars. Like it's just this Mars,
Mm.
Mars, Mars, Mars. Like who's actually guiding the ship here? Well, Mars is trying to, but whether it's successful or not, who knows? Like maybe not, because it has to come back to review whatever's happening now. It's just fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, and as we said earlier too, like because the Sun, Venus, and Mercury are all moving forward, like yeah, they're the ones that greet us at the open doors as we make our way through the zodiac. But it really is like Mars whirlwinding at the end, like just kind of coming through. And remembering too that like when Mars does enter Gemini, the first thing it does is have a chat with Pluto. And like Mars Pluto is very combustive and corrupt and can be difficult too. So like all of these more confronting or challenging aspects that the Sun, Venus, and Mercury have already done and are moving on with,
Mm.
Mars is doing now.
Mm.
And because he's doing it with some distance from those other planets, like not quite alone, but on his own terms,
Mm.
it's a different vibe. And yeah, so it's kind of moving like from a rock to a hard place, or like from one keg of dynamite to another, with Mars moving from Uranus to Pluto. And so I think that that will particularly come through for either people who have late Taurus or early Gemini placements, like important planets or angles there. You'll feel that more than others potentially. But also people who are real children of Mars. So if you are
Mm.
an Aries or a Scorpio sun, moon, or rising, you might really be feeling this
Yeah.
fluctuating power, for better or worse, with Mars at the moment. There's probably an opportunity for some real deep healing happening for the children of Mars at the moment. Um, but also people who just have Mars in a really prominent position. So
Mm.
like Mars near their rising or near the MC or in an angular house, or Mars near their sun or moon. So those people in particular will really, the warmth will be really apparent. The heat will be really obvious.
Yeah, this masculine energy that, you know, and within all of us, not just men, but masculine energy that flows, that thinks it needs to do it on its own. And it's like I can battle through this on my own. I can do this and I can charge, I can do that, blah, blah, blah. But interesting enough, when it comes retrograde, you know, maybe it realizes then that actually I need to call in, you know, maybe the feminine to come and help as well. And so we can come in divine union. Maybe that, you know, who knows? But it's really interesting to feel this Mars who has been trailing behind, like trailing behind and trying to catch up, but it's not quite. And it's like had this, you know, and just thinking of that Chiron in Aries too is like, well, fuck, I'm just going to do it on my own then, you know, like, you know, yeah,
Yeah.
just, you know, I can just do it on my own, and that's the part of the wounding, but you know, the healing comes later. But it's just interesting how it's all playing out with this Mars energy.
Yeah, and like also, you know, here we are talking about a chart for Mercury and its retrograde shadow, and again we get pulled down the Mars hole. I feel like that happens a lot. But it is again like it's just because of the aspects and the way that is set up that you know that's it's just the way it's just the way the cookie crumbles.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so at this time we also have the Sun sextiling Uranus the next day.
Mhm.
The day after that, Mercury will enter its trine with Chiron. So I love conceptualizing Mercury and Chiron aspects as times where we can really articulate the healing, articulate the suffering. Like it's a
Mm.
time where it feels maybe on the surface and able to have some movement through language or dance or facial expressions or like whatever it is. And like, especially in Leo too, like to
Yeah.
be able to really boldly express what we've learned, and particularly because it's a trine aspect, it's a more supportive aspect.
Mm.
Like, how can Mercury share what it's learned through this cycle with Chiron so far that serves the beating heart of itself, and that is also then the beating heart that others can gather around for understanding and warmth and reflection too. And what a beautiful, potent way to begin this retrograde period for Mercury as it enters its shadow is through the support of what it's learned through its sacred wounding with Chiron. Like take this wounding and the medicine and gift with you on this retrograde is quite a beautiful
Mm.
thing.
Yeah. And then what we have just after that too, we have Venus connecting back with the nodes, you know, that time spinner, but it's this time is just like this sextile energy to the south node here, you know, something from the past or, you know, that's been done, you know, and doing it already for the future of the north node. And there's a harmony that's flowing between these points. It's again, it feels like that time spinner, but it's like what lessons did we learn from the past that we can really project into the future that's already happened, but with ease. And yeah, it's really interesting too of looking at, you know, again coming back that Mars, you know, all the things that happened, what happened like a couple of days before and watching this dust settle. And it's like, right, now I see this and that, and I can do something with it through the portals of time.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. And also too, like again, like that kind of aspect, prepare for it to be subtle, prepare for it to be
Mm,
nuanced. So again, like really put your ear to the ground to listen. You
mm.
know, that's not although Leo is bold where Venus is, like that's not something that's necessarily going to come through and be like, hello, I've come from the nodes. You know, like it's not going to boom at you in the same
Mm,
way that the conjunctions or the squares will. But again, like just be willing to have those gentle, you know what, I'm going to walk this way today instead of
mm,
that way.
mm.
It's that kind of thing that can bring the Venusian delight of finding something unexpected. And just, yeah, be willing to listen to those quieter voices that draw you
Mm.
into precious places at that time.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking of, I have two children with Venus in Leo. So this is going to be an interesting time for us here. But I'm just thinking of that Leo Venus who's, wants to follow its passion and its dreams and its fire and its, but it's like this nuance of that sextile to the South Node. It's like that deep little precious part of the dreaming or the passion that you have held within that's starting just to go, actually, maybe we need to do this now. But
Mhm.
it's really in the pit of the stomach somewhere that you've just gone, oh, that's right, I forgot. And I really like that. And I really like that. That's really fun for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just going to look something up here, because Venus's last retrograde was in Leo,
That's right.
from July the 22nd, so almost this time last year exactly,
Mm,
through to early September. Venus retrograded in Leo. And so this is the first time that Venus has come back to this place since doing her big underworld journey
mm,
in the sign of Leo. And so what bright, beautiful, shiny new things does she have, now that she's in this space for the first time, probably in like 3 or 4 years, where she hasn't been doing her underworld dance? Like the last time she would have been there not retrograding would have been another 18 months before that again. So about 3 years ago. So
mm.
this is the first time in 3 years that Venus is visiting Leo without the added complexity of retrograding. And so you can have a think about whatever was going on for you this time last year through to early September that had themes around like boldness and clear, inspired, confident self-expression. Like,
Mm.
where did that get really shaky? And maybe like where was there lots of review happening around your sense of self and how you're seen in the world? And what gifts came as a result of being willing to be with whatever discomfort was happening there? And what do we get to see now over this 3 weeks, from, yeah, like sort of mid-July-ish through to early August, of Venus passing through Leo this time round? Like, how does boldly expressing ourselves, and really sitting in the seat of our own beauty, how does that move with greater ease at this time, rather than how that may have been 18 months ago?
Oh, that's so friggin' beautiful. And also we're going to have the Venus will catch up to Mercury as well and cross that, I think, into August. And it's just like that's where we could experience the expression of that, really coming out to be seen. Yeah, that's really good looking at that. And I think is this when we start to see Venus as the evening star as well? Like yeah, so actually that visibility starting to come after the Kazemi that happened. Is that June? Time is weird.
I think it was
Um,
early June. I think
Early
so.
June. And so this is we're starting to see her again. It's like, oh, there she is, which is really interesting after the rubble that's happened, a couple of days before. It's like, oh, there's the beauty that we sort of missed, or she was hidden, but starting to really see that. And again, it really feels like that south node sextile there. It's like, oh, just a little glimpses. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, it's yeah, I think that's a lovely thing to do with astrology too, is to look back and go, "Oh, what was going on the last time Venus was in Leo? Oh, she was retrograde. Well, how does that change how we'll experience that now?" So it's a good thing to reflect back on times like that to get a sense of what may come up now.
Beautiful.
Um, so
Second Capricorn full moon.
let's have a look at this one. Yeah, full moon in Capricorn, 21st of July of 2024 at 8:16 p.m.
So this is the second Capricorn full moon that we're experiencing this year. And it's really, really interesting. You would talk about the flipping and the time is weird sort of thing. And I'm just quickly changing my camera over. Sorry, excuse me. Where from April last year, 2023, we always had the sorry, you can't see me, can you? We always had the full moon of the axes first, and then the new moon. So, for example, before this, we had the Capricorn full moon first that happened really early on in Capricorn, and then the new moon in Cancer that came afterwards. But now everything's flipped. Really interesting. That again, that feeling of that nodal point, that moon points of it's been flipped, and now we will have the new moon in the axes first. So the next new moon is a Leo new moon, and then we'll have an Aquarius full moon, and then it will work like that. So there's something here about this flipping as well that's just occurred during this weird time over sort of June, that we're coming out, and the things are different now, the landscape's different. And how interesting that it's right on the last degree of, talking about the sensitive points in charts that are playing out at the moment. 29 degrees, here we are talking about the 29-degree point again, which is out of sign conjunction with Pluto at 0 degrees Aquarius, and Pluto's in retrograde, and it's going to travel back here to this point in early September. So there's certainly a story unfolding here that's continuing to unfold, that started back at the first Capricorn full moon, which was around solstice. That we're getting this glimpse, or there's a bigger cycle unfolding here, and now it's like the moon's passing the baton to Pluto to continue this story, to show us what is left in Capricorn after its journey since 2008 to carry through. But it's the full illumination, it's a full moon, full illumination of this final degrees. So it's like we're getting a insight, a big insight, because it is a full moon, into what exactly Pluto has done in Capricorn over the last, 20, no, not 20 years, but 14 years.
And I think one of the ways I love conceptualizing this last decan of Capricorn is with the tarot. And this decan is the Four of Pentacles. And so in the Smith Rider-Waite deck, we see a man, or King Midas, sitting down, holding on to a pentacle in his lap, and he's got a pentacle in his head, and I think there's one other either side or something like that. But it's this dynamic of resourcing, but also over-resourcing and greed, and needing to reflect on where we are on that scale of, do we have enough to get through this time? And Capricorn is so much about resourcing ourselves and of having what we need for the bigger picture and the longer journeys. Like, what solid foundations do we have? Like, how have we tended our hoofed feet of the goat to be able to continue the journey on to Aquarius and Pisces and beyond? And so, like, do we have what we need, and can we hold our own boundaries and pull them into ourselves when needed to contain ourselves and what we need to go forward? But we also need to make sure that we're not gripping so tightly that we're so contracted that nothing can penetrate our boundary and we can't receive anything either. It makes me think of I'm so scared I'm going to set those fireworks off again. I'm talking with my hands here. I just keep on waiting for
it'll be a perfect time if they do. Like, it'll be exactly, trust that. Part of the effects of the charts.
Jesus. But at the same time, it's like, don't grip the sand so tightly that it all slips through your fingers and you end up with nothing. There's a real like the fours in numerology, but in tarot, it's so much about the structures. And if you think about the shape of the square, like the four pillars, the four directions, the four elements, like all of these containing earthly structures, it's this full moon is really illuminating those. And Pluto again throws a bit of a weird spanner in those works, but because there's that sign barrier, there's a little bit of breathing room there. But this is a really potent time to reflect on, do I have what I need? But am I open to receive what I don't have, and just thinking about that, the fluidity of exchange, that we're not too rigid within that one way or the other, um, could be something that is illuminated at this time. And again, like especially that 29th degree, it really is like finishing up that Cancer Capricorn story of Cancer season as the sun finishes its time in Cancer.
Mm.
Um, what nourishment have we received? What nourishment could we have shared but didn't? And how may we suffer as a result of that? And that is partly the opportunity at this time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just thinking Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, so it's a Saturnian ruled full moon. And, Saturn, it's in Cancer is the bones, it's the structure of the bones. So also thinking of the ancestors here, Capricorn is a collective sign. So there's something again about that collective needing to look at how we coming back to that last degree of Cancer of nourishing, but nourishing not just for us, but for this collective to build good structures and good foundations, cardinal earth as well. So it doesn't, it's just not here and now. And just think again, that time spinning weirdness of what this has brought in. There's this thing about nourishing the bones of the collective, yes, that I'm just thinking of what's happening in the world right now, and we can see there's old structures that are falling because of that Pluto, whatever Capricorn Pluto transit did for you. So there's something that old has been dismantled. It's coming in, it's rubble, but it's the bones of what was. And how can we honor that time? How can we honor those bones that have gone before us so we can learn the lessons for that transformation and create something new for the future? But it's for the collective cardinal earth that is now starting to sprout here. Again, I feel like we come back to that dreaming of that 29 degrees, which is creating a sextile here as well. So it's subtle. There's a coming back to that dreaming of a new cycle, of that Neptunian cycle, and that it's all interconnected, but there's a dreaming here for the future of what foundations we have been left with, or what we are rebuilding now that Pluto has gone through Capricorn. And it's just a full illumination of that.
Yeah, so much so. And, I don't think I've ever thought of it before, which is so silly because it feels so obvious now that I have thought about it. But, Cancer really does it. It rules the breasts and the breast milk, but milk is full of minerals like calcium, which builds the bones of Capricorn. And so it really is like that access of receiving the fluid nourishment to build the physical structures, and actually one doesn't exist without the other, and it really breaks that idea of the duality of its emotions, or it's the concrete reality pragmatism, like actually you can't have one without the other. And like when the fire has burnt down, what's left is the minerals. What's left
Mm.
is those life-giving minerals and nutrients. Like, don't hoard them, put them back in the garden. You don't want to keep them in a plastic tub somewhere for later. Like, don't hoard the good stuff that's going to build what grows next. And I wondered too, like, is this also the bravery to share our stories, the bravery to
Mm.
share our experience of this Pluto Capricorn time, so that it nourishes and builds the strength of others? Like, how does how we show up in the world at this time nourish others? Like, I know that I'm constantly nourished seeing other people, and hearing the honesty of where they are, regardless of where that is. I wonder if I don't know, there's just something
Absolutely.
there.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking as you're talking about that, and just thinking of the bones that's been transformed, and just thinking of in
Mm.
biodynamics, there's a thing called biochar, which is burning the bones, and that the minerals that have been locked into the bones because of the burning process have now been released, and now you put that in your garden for fertilizer.
Yeah.
That's exactly what this transit feels like. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, here's the bones of the rubble that is left. Let's transform them, Pluto, and create something that's nourishing for the future generations to come for their bones. And it's just a repeated cycle, but it's fully illuminated here, but it's coming from the mother. Like everything's coming from this sun in Cancer at 29
Mm.
degrees. It's coming from the great mother. We're all come from the great mother. So it's really, yeah, it feels a really this full moon feels like a reflection more than anything of what has been and what is to come. Exactly what we just speak about this whole
Yeah,
report about that time spinning, and it's like, it's all weird and wacky.
sure. And this is just before Leo season kicks off. And so how does that nourishment support us to stand in the full fiery light of the sun, to feel brave enough to be seen and to show up honestly as we are, warts and all, and that with that Leo season that comes, we then will have the Aquarian full moon. And so like, a month from now, what gets illuminated for the good of all. And so this nourishment has to be shared and has to come first so that we can do the good work of brave, expressive, heartfelt Leo, and like ingenuous, also brave, heartfelt Aquarius, but in its own way. It's really important to have this in place and have the biochar there so that we can stand up and be nourished while we do our good work in the world.
Absolutely. Shine our light in Leo. And just quickly, the Mars story continues with the trine. Mars has just moved into Gemini, which brings another element. It's like, oh, it can pick up a pace a little bit, but it's a bit flighty perhaps. But at some point next month too, that Mars will conjunct Jupiter. But it's, yeah, there's just trying of this easy flow of being able to come back into that retrospect and to move it to movement into Gemini that has been locked up with Mars in Taurus.
Exactly. And so on the 22nd of July, so the next day, the sun will move into Leo and will instantly make its opposition with Pluto. So again, like just illuminating that Pluto story in Aquarius for the first time. On the 22nd, Mercury will also square Uranus at 8 a.m. AEST. And of course, like earlier this day on the 21st, Mars ingressed into Gemini. So there's some other important movements and things happening at the same time there.
Yeah. And this is when we might get another glimpse of what happened a couple of, with the Mars and Uranus conjunction in this square that's calling us to take action through our, what we communicate.
Yeah. I'm feeling to skip the chart, the sun opposite Pluto into Leo, because I feel like we've sort of covered that anyway.
Yeah.
Should we do the last one as Mercury ingressing into Virgo, do you think?
Yeah, let's do that.
Cool. So excuse me, this is the 26th of July 2024, 8:42 a.m. AEST. Mercury ingresses into Virgo. So we can see Mercury down here at 0 degrees of Virgo.
So we've got the Virgo, who is, immutable Earth. Things are shifting and changing, but Mercury is in its retrograde shadow. It's not long until Mercury is actually I haven't got it on my list here, but it's a couple of days coming up in August, early August, that Mercury moves in, it stations retrograde. So there is a big review process happening, but all of a sudden, things have moved out of this fixed, energy of Leo Mercury in Leo. And it's like, oh, the ground's changing now. It's like, but also showing up in service and how we speak, God, I'm losing it now. Virgo is, she shows up to service. It's about health. So, maybe there's around this time, this reviewing of, how we show up into the outer world and how we look after our bodies during this time too, because Virgo is very much about our physical body and how it changes, but our health is really important here, knowing that whatever's showing up here is going to come back for a review because of that retrograde that's happening in early August.
And I think like Virgo rules the small intestines from a medical astrology perspective. And so particularly when Mercury is at home in Virgo, this is all about assimilation. And when we think about the small intestine, it's a big empty sausage.
Mm,
It's a tube, and that barrier of the outside is extremely discerning. It's very discerning of what moves in and is allowed to enter the blood and what gets kept in the intestines and moved on through to the bowel as waste. And so Virgo is so much about good discernment. Is it this? Is it that? And really bringing our full intellectual rationale and capacity to discern one thing from another. And particularly because the retrograde is coming up on the 5th of August, a week from now, really allow that discernment to be really exacting. This might be a time, I think, particularly for Mercury ruled folk or for people with lots of Virgo placements, this could be a time where you mistake being pedantic for being discerning. Let yourself be a little pedantic, because there'll probably be some sort of magic in following that, because Virgo, it's very fixated on what the right thing to do is and how to go
mm,
about it in the most conserving like kind of way. Like, how can everything have what it needs in the most efficient kind of way? And so really let a little bit of that draw to be what some might call pedantic. Like, let yourself be efficient, let yourself be discerning at this time, because when Mercury retrogrades, a lot of that has the potential to unravel. So listen now and prepare well. Don't ignore where you're like, oh, that tap's been leaking for a while. I really should, you know what, I'll do it a few weeks. Don't, if you hear the call to do something like that, do it and trust that it's come up for a good reason.
absolutely. And so interesting, Mercury is ruled, I mean, Virgo, to say it again, Virgo is ruled by Mercury and Chiron. Chiron actually stations retrograde on at this time at 11:50 p.m. on the same day, on the 26th. So just after Mercury has moved into its home sign of Virgo, the other ruler of Virgo, Chiron, stations retrograde at this point, and it will station retrograde here at 23 degrees and will move back to 19 degrees of Aries, which is again a Mars ruled sign, on the 30th of December. So it's in retrograde for a while. And so this wounded healer that's showing up here to be exactly what Becky said, to attend to the things that we are seeing, that we've been watching for a little while, like, that cough that's been persisting for a while, or, something that's been happening that you go, oh, I've got to come back and review that. And thinking also Mercury is about to station retrograde too. There's something here about really attending to the things that have been already here and to do something about it.
Yeah,
Mm,
I'm thinking of this, like, to me, Virgo in so many ways is the herbalist. I'm thinking
mm,
about Chiron's connection to Virgo with that earth medicine is, you don't just learn how to be a herbalist by learning the good things that plants do. You also learn how they can be dangerous or even deadly. You learn about the body. You learn about the difference of everybody's body. And there's something I think there, like if you look at a plant and you think it's a dandelion, just double check, like, and that's part of that retrograde thing, is like those easy, simple mistakes that we typically wouldn't make, and then we make them. Like, if you're just hearing that little call of, you know what, I'm going to double check that. This is a good time to trust the call to double check things. And I think it's a good time for, with that Chiron stationing retrograde, of conceptualizing the magnificent beauty of the complexity of the natural world, and that everything is a medicine potentially, but that everything is also a poison of the wrong dosage. Like, there's just, oh wow, a beautiful wattle bird just like swooped past and
Ah,
landed right
talk about the
here.
herbalist, yeah.
Yeah, just, and to like what a bird can eat and be well from, we can't be eat and be well from. Like, there's just something about the absolutely beautiful complexity of the natural world and how discerning we have to be about what we take in. So for people who have heavy Virgo placements, but also for people who maybe have like gut intolerances or digestive conditions, this could be a time of really needing to bring your discernment around what you're literally taking in to your body. If you know gluten doesn't feel good, sister, stop eating the glutens. Stop eating the gluten, sister. And also too, like if that's not your problem, then enjoy the glutens, like don't over discern or overdo it and like over restrict your diet, and make sure you're really getting what you need to. That works both ways. But I think that this is a time to think about what you need to be well, and to use the information you already have about yourself too. Like it's one thing to uncover new information and be like, oh, I had no idea I had IBS or that I'm a celiac. Like that's a really great thing to do. But also, I dare say you have a lot of really great anecdotal, empirical evidence of being in your own body for however many years old that you are. Also, just really trusting that Chiron wisdom. Chiron isn't just the wounded healer. He was a philosopher. He was a scholar. He was the wisest of all the wise men. It brings so much knowing, and I think trust your own knowing to be able to apply discernment as you need to as well.
Absolutely. And, following up from this on the 31st, have we got that chart? The sun sextile the south node. So just moving on to that. So following up after this, we have Venus, making a trine. Where is she? Is that work? Oh, God. Where am I? Going from the nodes.
Yeah.
Venus, which comes next. Venus trine Chiron here. So this Venus in Leo is making this harmonious aspect back to that now retrograde Chiron to say, let's bring some love and light into this space of your review process of what's been happening in your healing process of who you are.
Yeah, and with solar ruled Leo, that's happening from where Venus is, that truly is the light coming in, the warmth coming in. The sun really is the core of vitality and health from a medical astrology perspective. It's like, do we have the literal warmth in our blood that moves through our bodies? And like movement is, and that warmth is so essential. Without warmth, there is no life. And so feeling that Venus is really carrying the calendula, the solar medicines that it's bringing to keep tending that Chiron. And yeah, particularly because it's the trine, it is that really supportive aspect of good medicine with, well, Mercury is sort of assimilating the data. And again, just really listening to your body. I love the food analogy so much. Like if the food goes in and doesn't feel good, listen, like let the Venusian component of that really come through with its medicine. It's really hard. Herbal medicine has a really hard time doing good work if we're putting aggravants in all the time. So if part of your Virgo discernment is, what, coffee really fucks me up, I need to reduce my coffee, this is a great time to be using discernment around making health decisions like this, because the retrograde in Virgo, it's just fertile ground for that stuff to arc up. So really great time to be gathering information around what's an aggravant and what doesn't actually work for you, so that the good stuff can come in and support you better.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking also this 31st of July, for here in the Southern Hemisphere, we are, this is the part of the year where we get really cold, because it's been, this is the coldest part of our whole season. And that just thinking of Chinese medicine too, of just keeping the body warm. But the thing is, in Leo, it's fixed fire. We have to keep fueling it, otherwise it will burn out. And that whole, if you ever try to keep a fire going throughout the night in your home to keep it warm, you got to, at some point in the night, you're going to have to get up and put more wood onto it. You're going to have to keep feeding it. So this review of health and, it's going to require you to do some work around it and to keep going. And Mercury in that retrograde and Chiron in retrograde, it's like there's something here to be reviewed, but you have to keep going because of that fixed fire that is needing to attend. Otherwise it just burns out and then you've got nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, you don't wake up in the middle of the night hoping to keep your house warm and throw newspaper on the fire.
No.
Like if you want a warm house, that's not what you do. And so it's also just using a little bit of that, shall I say, brutal common sense with yourself too, of like, if I want to really get through the day today in a not burnt out way, then maybe I will have oats for breakfast instead of a coffee.
And the
um,
Virgo-ness of planning, like you
yes.
got to look at all the elements and all the fragments and actually put some thought into planning on what you're going to need. Like that fire that you attend to, or your inner fire that you need at the beginning of the day. Make sure you got the dry wood there. Make sure you got the different pieces of wood, that you got the big wood that's going to burn all night, and you've got the little ones to light the fire potentially in the morning. Like it's the organization that Virgo and Mercury is bringing to you, so you can keep that fuel, that light burning, or yeah, it's really interesting with that Virgo-ness of that organization that is requiring you to look ahead and to look, what you've got now, and to plan around what is it that you're going to need to sustain
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah. And just
I,
coming, sorry,
no, you go.
I was just going to move on to the quick nodes. Did you want to?
Oh, well,
Yeah.
just very quickly then, this is such a good time of year for citrus fruits. Like lemons, oranges, limes, they are little solar batteries. They have been collecting all of the solar goodness all year. I'm just looking at my huge, like 2-story lemon tree next to me. They truly hold the essence and the acidity and the warmth and the life-giving nature. Like you suck on a lemon and you know you're alive, right? Like really bringing that solar life-giving energy at this time. It can be really simple. You don't have to do a ceremonial dance. You can just suck on a lemon. Like there's a lot of really easy ways to connect with that warmth and the movement that you need as well.
Absolutely. And I love how the earth reflects what you need at that time. Having the orange
Mhm.
looks like a sun, the lemon looks like a sun. Like, it's that simplicity that Virgo, of the earth is. It's all right in front of us. We just need to be listening to what we're being guided to do, and listening to our bodies, and listening to, the world around us, to be able to discern of what is it that we actually need.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. And to finish off how we began with with the nodes. So, at the beginning of our reading today, we started talking about the nodal bendings of the sun and how that was a square. But now we are here where the sun has moved on, and it's now forming a direct trine, 160-degree angle with the north node and the sextile to the south node, 8 degrees, 8 degrees.
Yeah, and so it's just continuing. It's just another chapter in the eclipse story. And look, of all of the chapters in the eclipse story, this is one of the more subtle ones, like when
Mhm.
there's the trine and the sextile, but it's still a progression in the story nonetheless. Um, and so, yeah, just having a think about like what else is really showing up and coming through at this time in that strange nodal way, which is potentially the track bringing me to the next set of eclipses 2 months from now. So, yeah, it's worth just keeping in mind how that story is unfolding.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that potential of time being a bit strange and weird, and feeling into like potentially that time spinner element that's sort of there on the sidelines, but it still has, that influence that could sort of send us on a bit of a what the hell is going on right now, and to know that that's just that, and that you're not actually crazy, that time is
Mhm.
doing weird shit, that's a part of this process of the bigger cycles that we're in at this time. Like we have come for these times, and to bring our medicine, and this is a part of it, because as we spoke about right at the beginning, this Neptunian placement, we're in this generational forwards and backs moment of creating change for the betterment of our great grandchildren. So yeah, to take note of this weird stuff, weird times, Becky,
Weird
weird
times. That should be the
times.
name of the episode, but with a little Y in the weird. Weird times.
Weird times.
Yeah.
So that finishes off our key transits for July. But what's coming up for August? We have, as we've seen, that Mercury will station retrograde. We have the Mars conjunct Jupiter. And also then we have the Jupiter square Saturn. So that's a big one that, and all of a sudden Jupiter comes in. We didn't hear much about Jupiter in July, but it's just been waiting for, because he or she, it will take the limelight for August because of that Jupiter square Saturn. And we have a new moon in Leo and a full moon in Aquarius on this new Pluto axis as well.
Yeah, and I think just as a really quick note, as a final wrap up, it's really it's worth noticing not just what we're talking about, but also what we're not talking about. Because this episode, we've mentioned Venus a small couple of times with
Mm.
like some sort of vague sextiling stuff going on. We haven't talked about Jupiter at all because Jupiter doesn't have a great deal of influence this month, and frankly, neither does Venus. And just by knowing that the two benefics are not key players in July gives us a great deal of information. And again, it just adds to the story of what we've been talking about of like, there's some tricky, strange stuff going on, and the benefics are sort of tucked away in locations where they're not a major player in the story. And so last month we talked lots about Jupiter and
Mm.
lots about Venus, and there was the Cassinis and all of this stuff going on. And here it's really been like nodes, Mars, Pluto, Uranus, like much heavier, more difficult stuff. And so when we move into August, yeah, we'll start to feel a little bit more of that Jupiterian influence as the planets start making more aspects to Jupiter again.
Yes.
And
Yes.
actually, as a flag, we have an amazing, what was it, like 3 hour long episode on Jupiter's
Yeah.
year in Gemini. So, like, yes, we will be talking about Jupiter squaring Saturn in August. But if you want some really awesome deep diving information about that moment in August and that bigger Jupiter and Gemini year long cycle, go and have a look at I think it's episode 2 or 3, which is
So,
Jupiter's
yeah.
year in Gemini. That's well worth a visit or a revisit at those key Jupiter Saturn times in particular.
Absolutely, because that happens, that Jupiter and square Saturn happens, two times in Gemini, and then next one in must be Cancer. So it it this is again the cycles upon cycles. But yeah, go back and listen to that Jupiter podcast that we released, a few months ago now, episode 2, because it really gives this bigger cycle that is coming in August with the Jupiterian story. It's a big one. It's a big one.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
much so. And so if you have enjoyed our episode today and you enjoy our work, please do go and check us out on Patreon at the Sentient Sky. You can follow for free. And we have like updates and things that we share there. And we're trying to community build there as well, so that it's a place to ask questions and just be like, holy shit, that Mars thing or whatever. Come and join us there on Patreon. And we do also have tiers for subscribers who get extra beautiful goodies and a bit more from us individually in that community as well. And you can find our podcasts on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts as well.
Absolutely. And if you're liking what you're seeing here, ways you could support us, there is a place on the Patreon that you can send us a donation, so you don't have to commit to a full membership. That just helps us to do this more. Like if we get, supported here as well, we can do this more, which is what we love, and we'd love to keep doing this and give more information. Send us thumbs up, and it sounds really tacky, but it's how the algorithms work. Thumbs up in the YouTube and wherever you're listening to this podcast. And also, if you're liking what you're hearing here, share it.
Mm.
Share this wisdom out there. This is a collective wisdom and knowledge that's been channeled through us. And if you're feeling that you're getting some benefit out of it, if you share it, those people will too. So, it really helps our collective energy to rise and elevate, because the more that we're doing this work, the easier it's going to be for all of us to come from it, from this collective cosmic perspective.
Mm. very much so.
Yeah.
And so what do you have going on at the moment? What kind of offerings and things are you doing?
Well, I'm coming back after illness, as we heard earlier. So
Yeah.
I'm slowly but surely coming back to the temple. So the Invoking Inanna journey that was due to start at the end of June has been postponed, and that will now begin at the start of August. So that is the Mama Bear journey that didn't quite get off the ground for several reasons, but the new dates will be from August through to December, and that is online, and that is that listening to the call of the underworld that we spoke about with that Venus and Pluto opposition. What are you hearing? The call to change. And that's a full 5-month journey of deep transformation following the myth of Inanna. There is a potential to do it face to face too here on Jojo Wurrung Country in Central Highlands, Victoria. So that feels very exciting. I have the Temple of New Wheat Astrological Study Group, and that is happening. Another Patreon as well. And I'm available for one-on-one astrology readings and counseling, holistic counseling. And also in October, we're taking a gorgeous bunch of women out to sit on the land with Wild Earth Magic Wilderness Solo Experience here in Victoria. Very, very excited to be doing that out in the wild country out there north of the Grampians. That's going to be so much fun, so good.
Oh, it looks so amazing. I so look forward to when Naya is just a little bit older. I will be there. I already feel myself there. I'm just patiently waiting.
Amazing country. What do you got coming up, Becky?
Hopefully very little, because I'm supposed to be on a break, but I've been too busy being sick to rest. Is that true? No, I've been too busy resting while sick to have the kind of rest I hoped to have.
Yeah, that's it.
So yeah, at the moment I'm taking a little bit of time off to hibernate. I am coming back into one-on-one practice mid-August. August is already booking up though for one-on-one, so because I'm only working on Saturdays. So if you are hoping to catch me after my break, do go and book in sooner than later. And I'm offering naturopathy, astrology, and tarot in my one-on-ones. I've been meaning to update my shop for over a month because I have all this beautiful full moon materia from the full moon in Sag, which have that beautiful Jupiter Venus action happening. So I've got, it's really, really special. I've got full moon essences, ritual bath salts. I'm going to make a body butter. There's an anointing oil. I'm actually going to sew some little mugwort dreaming pouches with some of the dried mugwort left over from my garden, which was transplanted from Yvonne's garden, as a matter of fact.
Funny?
So it's so
Virgo.
beautiful. Oh, it's so perfect. It's so good. And there's a couple of new elixirs to go up to. So if you're not on my email list, you can join at the bottom of any of the pages on my website. And I highly recommend that if you're interested in the products, because that will be the first place that I share all of that. And lastly, some of my essences and elixirs are at the Good Food Emporium in Narre Warren. My name there is the Witch of Little Hills, and you can find me in their heirloom collected heirloom. I'm toast. I'm so done. At their heirloom collective, there's some in person there, so you can go and taste some of the elixirs and hold the essences and see what you think. I'm out. That's me.
Very delicious.
Thank you.
Take a bow. Thank you very much for listening. If you've got to this point, well done. That was very epic, and I hope that you got as much out of it as we did. Stay tuned for next month. Have a good July. May you feel, go through it and come out the other end all intact and feeling safe and held. And we will see you next month. Take care.
See you in August. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Sentient Sky. Follow us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/thesentientsky for episode updates, our contact info, events and offerings, and to connect with us and our co-created community. Thank you so much to each and every patron for their support and presence within that community.
Deep gratitude to our ancestors, guides, and to the green world of the earth and the cosmic sky. May we ever be acting in service to the highest good of all beings. We pay our deepest respect to the First Nations people and to the elders past, present and emerging, to the Wadawurrung and the Djurja country people. We give great thanks to the continuing connection to the land, sky, sea and their communities. We also like to express our deepest of gratitudes to our own ancestors and to the land, sea and sky of their origins. Both of us would like to thank our teachers, families, friends and communities that support us and inspire us in this cosmic work. Especially big love to our beautiful children for whom this is ultimately for.
Great thanks to my brother Daniel Van Horsen for allowing us to use his original music, whom you can find on Facebook for details on his offerings as a session musician and sound engineer. Until next time, see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Much love. Bye.